Good morning, everyone. Let's call the meeting of the Amador County Board of Supervisors together at just about exactly 9 o'clock on February 27th. Welcome. And one thing I do want to share is that there is a pilot project going today about video streaming this meeting.
Yes, the KVGC is streaming it live from their website. You see the iPhone set up. So we're going to try it today and see how that goes. And if it works today, then we will have a big announcement in 2 weeks. So, but if you want to give it a shot right now, you can log on to the KVGC website and see how it's streaming.
Great. And we haven't heard the details of this arrangement yet, but the last I heard, this would be at no cost to the county. Is that correct?
Correct. The county's not paying for it.
So we're trying to get modern. And I need a new face because of this. Anyway. All right. Closed session. Yeah. Closed session. Update was given to staff on conference with labor negotiators. Then we went to item 3B, and we denied the claim of Richard Shane Plisse. Is it Plisse or Plisse?
I think it's Plisse. Yeah.
Plisse. And confidential minutes were approved. So please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, a nation under
Okay, public matters not on the agenda. Is there anyone that wishes to speak on issues that are not on the agenda?
Good morning.
I guess I'll sign in here, but I have a number of questions I'd like to ask of the supervisors.
Would you state your name, please? I'm sorry.
My name is John Labuda. I live in Sutter Highlands area, Sutter Creek. Brian's my supervisor for the area. My questions are, what are my rights to access my property? A survey map of record on file in Amador County shows an access and utility easement of 60 feet. I would like to know the following. Do I have a legal right to open the access to that width? Do I have a legal right to remove vegetation to provide clear access for fire equipment? CAL FIRE wants a minimum clearance around my home. My insurance company looks at the access to my home and the clearance around the home. Does the state of California give me the right to protect my home utilizing the access and utility easement that is on my survey map? And must I have permission from the landowners that my easement passes to remove vegetation to the easement line? If yes, why, since the easement is defined as access to the survey, as access on the survey map of record? I respectfully request a written response to each of these questions, and I will provide copies to the clerk.
Any comments, Greg?
Well, yes, we had a conversation. He came to my office, and I informed him, unfortunately, that it was not a county matter, and that I couldn't advise him as the attorney to the county on an issue, on an access issue for his property. And so my position is the same. The board wouldn't weigh in on that personal private property issue either.
Well, I have a question about that, because your survey map is approved by the county surveyor. So why can't I get a definition of what my rights are from the county?
We only record those survey maps and sign that they meet the legal requirements. We don't make them or enforce them. If there's something on a.
The
if
map
there's
is
a-
approved by your
If there's a
surveyor.
right on a map that you need to enforce, you need to do that individually, civilly in court, if you can't work it out with your neighbors.
I think it's a pretty straightforward question. I can't find any information in the online, in the state registry or anything. Why isn't that something that I can have an answer to without going to a private attorney and paying a fee to get an answer? This should be something that the Board of Supervisors and the county surveyor tell me what's legal.
Wouldn't it also be like if you have a piece of property that is deeded to somebody, however that deed is written is what rights you have, and we don't enforce deeds to property. It's a private transaction. Wouldn't it be similar to that too, Craig, really?
Yes.
That's pretty much where it is. Now, if it was like a deeded to the county, would that make it, or like a county right away? That'd probably be different.
If it was county right of way that was being encroached upon, then the county wanted to enforce it, then that would be something that the county does and that our office would look into. But this is, like I said, I don't know anything. I haven't seen any maps. I don't know if this easement is to his property or to another property. They're not necessarily accessed generally to the public. And it's going to take research and time, and it's just simply, we don't represent individual property owners in their disputes.
It's not a dispute, it's a question.
Well, then you would work it out with your neighbor if it's not a dispute.
But what are my legal rights? My map says I have a 50-foot easement, access and utility. I understand the utility part, that's PG&E. The access part, why do I have to get permission to trim it out? That's my question.
You'd have to look at, probably your deed, look at your title report, and see what rights you have under that when you bought that property.
It just says access easement.
Well, who says you have to have permission to trim it?
Every time we try to get any road trimming done, we have to have signatures from all the landowners. Why?
Again, this
Amador
is
Fire
not-
Safe Council comes in the same thing. We try to get work done, we have to get everybody's approval. But if it's an access and utility easement that's on a survey map, that's issued by the county or through the county legal system, why must we get those approvals?
It's
It's a private right granted by one property owner to another property owner. If you need to enforce that, you need to do that civilly with your own attorney. What you're asking me to do is give you a legal opinion that you will take to other property owners and say, see, look, the county says you have to do X. That is not what we do. That is not my role, because I am not your attorney. I'm not giving you legal advice on your rights respective to these other owners. I don't know what their position is. So unfortunately, I'm not in a position, and the county's not in a position to help you with this.
I will share with you that in the tree mortality work that Professor Forster and I have been doing, absolutely every single dead tree that we have a state fund to take down, we cannot step foot on that property until we get a release from the property owner.
I can understand if you're not in the easement. That's at that point, it's private property. Survey map shows me an easement of 60 feet.
I understand your question, what it is, they bring a map in, they want to record the map. Surveyor records a map with the easement. What that easement is whatever was done by that subdivider, what rights he gave to successive property owners, following property owners. We can't enforce that. Whatever rights you have is what you have. It's not a county roadway. It's a private roadway with private benefits, private conditions. So it's something, it's not in our jurisdiction.
Okay.
I mean,
Accept
we
that at
wish
this
you could
point, but I think it's asking for an opinion. I guess I've got it. You're not going to be
We
included.
can't.
All right, thank you.
Sorry about that, but it's,
Any other public matters not on the agenda?
Yes, good morning.
Sir, good morning.
Morning.
My name's Stephen Furpo. I live up in Pioneer. My issue is with noise. I have a neighbor who plays the drums a lot. I've gone through sheriff, I've gone through code enforcement, and this is one of the options that was given to me to express myself to the supervisors to see if there's anything in the works for a noise ordinance. That's the big problem. There's no noise ordinance for the county. The sheriffs, everybody has a lot of sympathy for us, but they say, I could go ask the guy to stop playing, but I can't enforce it. So he keeps playing. So we're kind of at his mercy. He plays day and night. So
Could I ask you when your neighbor plays the drums?
it's been anywhere from 7 in the morning to 1 o'clock in the morning. And it can be 3-4 times a day. He just doesn't play once a day. I mean, if I knew he was going to play like at 11 o'clock in the morning, that's fine. But when I'm laying in my bed and I'm hearing that boom, boom coming through my walls, that's a problem.
I don't know the actual application of the hours, but I'll tell you that, the best advice is to talk to your neighbor and try and reason with them. That doesn't always work.
No, it's
But
gone past that.
two, I know when I've had some functions at my house, I think 10 o'clock at night
Right.
is when you have to stop the music.
So I keep getting it.
So I think you have a right at that point to complain to law enforcement about your neighbor
Right.
and have them come in and tell him to stop playing the drums.
Because it's disturbing the peace, really, and that's
Yes.
what the sheriff could enforce, but I don't know the circumstances around that ability.
Well, I have a constituent, similar situation. It's not drums, but it's music, and it goes beyond 10 o'clock. So they've asked for an ordinance like that.
Yeah, the sheriffs that we talked to that have come to our house have expressed they would like to see something like that, but they can go to the guy's house and ask him, and as soon as they drive away, if he starts playing again, there's not much they can do, so.
I would go right down the hall and ask them about I know they have to stop at 10 o'clock at night. I'm not sure if there are restrictions in the morning hours.
Where would down the hall, what do you mean?
Right down to our planning department, and the code enforcement is also there.
I've been there.
Right, just go out the door, take a right, and go all the way down.
I don't.
Next office.
I don't think there's anything there, Supervisor Forrester.
You don't think there's a time when it must be?
There is 10 o'clock at night. People have to stop playing music loud. I mean, that,
But it's not
I've
important.
had law enforcement show up in my place if it's 10:01 and say they need to stop, so.
So it might be helpful for you to have the actual written code that says that.
But there isn't. That's what I've been told, there isn't.
No written code.
I just wanted to express that, and hopefully something, if you guys have anything going on your agenda to look at something like that, I appreciate
To
it.
look at a noise ordinance.
Thank
you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Right, let's go to the regular, approval of the agenda, please.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Approval of items on the consent agenda. Are there any items that people would like to take off and put on the regular agenda? No?
Second.
Okay, there's been a motion and a second. All in favor of approving the consent agenda, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, we're on the regular agenda. I don't know who is the person that's supposed to speak on item 5A. Is he speak? It's on the grand jury report.
He's here.
Oh, he is here. I'm sorry. Please come up. You're up. Presentation of a special report to the Board of Supervisors. Presentation only.
Madam Chairperson, gentlemen, sorry about the confusion last week. I was at work and I gave the wrong time to my pro tem, but I do understand that you've all received a copy.
Yes.
This is basically bringing it to the public. The investigation came from the arrest, prosecution, and conviction of the former Amador County of Education Superintendent, and the 2016-2017 grand jury chose from that incident to look into the purchasing practices, the finance and accountability within the school district. And it was carried over to this year's jury. My name's Eric Ford, but by the way, I'm the foreman for this year's grand jury. So if you have any questions that I could answer, it's informational. The report has been delivered to the parties that are responsible for the responses in it.
And they have 90 days to respond?
That is correct.
It would be of interest to me, and maybe I can just do it one-on-one to see what they've done to correct the sound.
Yeah, so we will, it's not always a practice of every grand jury, but our grand jury is going to suggest, because it's what we were doing, a follow-up committee that addresses the responses to the previous grand jury's reports and then puts that in their report that comes out. So, but you're always welcome to any inquiries you have regarding that. Contact the grand jury. I'd be glad to let you know what they responded. But we are going to try to have some continuity, and that the next grand jury's report will follow up and make sure that those recommendations, if they agreed with them, they were implemented.
Thank you. Board, any questions?
Doesn't the school district, in this case, wouldn't they have to answer those questions before you're disbanded, the current grand jury?
So yes, we do have 90 days before this grand jury is done, due to this being a special report that was issued early. So we may have those, we should have those responses before then, and we will try to include those in this current, but I'm talking about future grand juries. We're going to try and get them to have all the responses followed up on in subsequent years.
Yes, I don't know if I heard you wrong, but you might want to give a clarification. I thought you said former superintendent of schools. I think it was assistant superintendent of schools.
I believe.
Are we allowed to use names? No. My counsel is shaking his head no. Okay.
Either way, perhaps I misspoke, but the
Maybe she was both.
so that's where there is some confusion when we've looked into this, because the dual role of, there's two different school boards, but they're made up of the same people. One's the Amador County Unified School District, the other's the Amador County Office of Education. The superintendent for one is elected, the other one's appointed by the board, and most of the time those are the same, end up being the same person. So there's two different entities governed by the same people.
Kind of a convoluted affair for a while.
It is, and who's responsible for what is not always clear either.
Any other questions? Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, item 5B, discussion and possible action relative to the repayment of a $27,000 loan made by the Board of Supervisors to the Amador Council of Tourism in order to investigate the creation of a tourism marketing district.
Good morning. Maureen Funk, Amador Council of Tourism. Pardon me while I fill in my name here. Just to review, 3 years ago in December 2014, the Board of Supervisors agreed to loan Amador Council of Tourism $27,000 to go forward and try to form a tourism marketing district. Took us 3 years, but we did complete the petition drive and go through the process. Sadly, the opposition was able to garner enough signatures to turn it the other direction. And although we had successfully completed the 5 city council hearings and gone through two out of 3 of our public hearings needed to form the district, there were enough signatures that had that disagreed with formation of the district. So I'm here today to discuss a repayment plan with the Board of Supervisors. Pardon me. My Board of Directors has approved offering a 3-year repayment plan. We plan not to take away any dollars from our primary task of marketing to Amador County, for Amador County. We are planning a very powerful membership drive and it will have a kickoff event here on March 29th. And we're inviting everyone. We're inviting all our past members, potential new members to come learn about the work that we've been doing. It also coincidentally happens to be our 15-year anniversary as an organization, so it's a great time to look back a little bit on the success that we have achieved in spite of this setback today. So I am proposing to you, with the permission of my board, to have a 3-year repayment plan. We respectfully request the ability to pay the first third in September, on September 1, and then we are happy to accommodate from there any payment schedule that you would like that the Board of Supervisors would like to see.
Questions of the board? Or actually, I'd like Chuck to comment since he's our banker.
Well, it's up to the board, however you want to do that. We could simply withhold, if we're going to do it over 3 years, we could withhold $9,000 a year for 3 years from what we contribute to ACT. That might make life a little easier. I don't know.
We don't want to. I appreciate that suggestion. Thank you. I think as a board, what the discussion has been is we do not want to look like we have lessened the effort that we're making as a marketing organization, which is our primary activity. So we are taking it upon ourselves to raise additional monies. I would feel better if the board could see clear to allow us to cut checks back to the county in that regard, so that it doesn't to our community, our partners, look like we've lessened our marketing dollars, because that is not the intent of this organization at this point in time.
Understandable, board members?
So are you looking to make 3 equal payments, $9,000 a year on September 1st?
That would be ideal.
Sure.
Yes.
Other board members?
You're talking about
That's fine with me.
possibility of a 4-year repayment. Why did you decide to go with the 3?
Because at the point that we left the board meeting last month, that's what they voted on, was the 3-year repayment plan. They did not vote on a 4-year. There has been conversation at the executive board level to if we could cut it to 4 years, if we could stretch it to 4 years, it would be less painful for us as an organization. To be completely open about our efforts here, we actually hope to pay. We're going to under-promise and
Over-deliver.
And over-deliver.
So that is our intent. But yes, stretching it to 4 years would certainly alleviate blip years, which we all have, difficult years.
Pat, did you have comments?
No, that's 3 years seems fair enough.
Well, I would like to suggest possibly an alternative, which are you planning to undertake, because you have a year to try to do this with the Tourism Marketing District again. Are you folks intending to do that?
I believe that will be the case.
Put you on the spot here.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you. I have a lodging committee that has formed since this has all gone the way it's gone. And I'm going to speak for them because I haven't asked for them to speak today. So the lodging committee has made the decision to begin formation of a voluntary tourism marketing district, and we're putting together a packet to go in the mail this month. And the thought there was to set aside, yes, eventually go back and form a county-wide district. And we would not need an additional loan from the Board of Supervisors. We would set some monies aside out of that voluntary marketing district with the aim to pay for it ourselves. So that is the thinking right now.
So would it be of help to the council to delay repayment from September until that 1 year period has gone by? I don't know, Chuck, would that be agreeable?
It's fine. Certainly, it's not going to make or break the county. We're not going to end up,
I have some directors here. I don't think I'm the person to make that decision. I think my directors need to speak to it because I am an at-will employee. So
I also should hear from
they're
the
back
other
there.
board members.
I think they're back there talking about it. I don't know why they don't want to come up here.
I promise you'll be treated with courtesy.
It's perfectly comfortable for me to be here.
Wayne's coming
you.
up, madam.
I got nominated. I think that's great, and depending on how things shake out going down the road, you may see Maureen or one of us come back again. But those of you that know me know I'm an advocate that you incur debt, you start to do the thing, and my preference, and it sounds like several of them back there, would be to go ahead and start September 1st so we make it good. We may come back at some point down the road, several years later, to ask the county to help us out again, and I think it's very important that when you help us out, that we honor our obligations. So that's my perspective.
Thank you, good for you. Any board comments? Okay. Public, anybody from the public wish to comment on this? Again, it was a $27,000 loan, and ACT is offering to start paying it back in 3 years, starting September.
that would be
Public.
September 1st of 18, 19, and 20, correct? 3, okay.
Okay. Motion from the board?
Well, I'd make a motion that add an authorized repayment of the $27,000 loan that was made to Amador Council of Tourism, that they repay it back 3 equal payments of $9,000. First payment to be made September 1st, 2018. Successive payments September 1st, 2019 and 1st, 2020.
Second that.
Any more discussion? Chuck, were you discussing something that needs to be shared?
I was just trying to remember where we took it out of so we could put it back in the same spot. I will.
Oh.
I'll,
You figure that out.
That's a good idea. Okay. Okay. All in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. Best of luck to you in your organization's endeavors. Okay, item 5C, General Services Administration, discussion and possible action to adjust priorities of the project list. Mr. Hopkins.
Madam Chair, members of the board, good morning. John Hopkins, General Services Director. This is on your agenda due out of conversations with the CAO and the union to move up the public crew quarters on that list of priorities. So what you have there before you is the old list, which is above, and the new recommended list below. Any questions?
So the total stays the same.
Yes.
All that changes is the Public
priority.
Works crew headquarters moves up 3 spaces, it looks like.
Correct. Because we've already started to actively work on everything above that
Okay.
to date anyway. For example, the DA elevator roof,
Yes.
we had rejected those bids. That's back out to bid currently right now.
Okay.
It's on the street, and the probation carpet right above that is also out on the street right now.
Okay. Actually, you were providing updates on these projects in the past, and I'd love to see that next time if we could.
Yeah.
That'd be
Yeah, we
great.
could do that. Well, it's not just these projects, it's also,
No, I
yeah.
realize, and then the emergency things and
Right.
stuff that pulls you everywhere.
Staff is currently actively engaged in the jail control panel project right now. There's anywhere from 1 to 3 people over there a day. We're hoping to wrap that up sometime, maybe by the end of March, but that's a $600,000 project, and I think the board's aware of the necessity for that to get done.
The IT leak, is that something that if we did it sooner, it's going to prevent more damage, or is it just a matter of tracking it down and fixing it?
Question.
Well, that leak there, doesn't, it's a relatively small leak, but it's going to require major work on the building to identify where it's coming from.
Don't fix it, though. Is it going to cause
Will it get
more
worse?
damage?
No, it's not going to cause more damage that I can tell from what it basically leaks inside the building there. It's not affecting anything of any substance, so it's basically mopping up the water and trying to mitigate that circumstance. We haven't observed any mold either in those areas, so due to the type of construction, steel, stucco, that type of thing, dense glass, it doesn't seem to create a mold problem right now. So it's merely mopping up the water, but we are going to have to deal with the exterior of that portion of the building.
I have the same question with the DA HVAC. That got moved down a little bit, so.
Yeah, like I said earlier, this is out of a conversation with Chuck and the union.
Right.
So it's not necessarily out of necessity for priority as far as safety, health, the need of equipment. We did have to respond to the district attorney last year and replace one unit that had failed because they're all very old. In an emergency response, that we got that unit replaced. However, we're also I'm working on, we actually have a meeting tomorrow on some energy issues. And so I've got 3 or 4 energy companies right now that are bugging me about solar and HVAC and that kind of stuff. So that's in the mix as well to maybe see if we can't take advantage of the HVAC portion of that. So it doesn't really bother me too much to move that around.
Okay, and if the attorneys have to be hot next summer, that's just fine.
Well, and if
I'm
something
kidding. It's a joke.
if it fails, we'll deal with it immediately like we normally do.
Yes, okay.
And like part of the
Questions?
reason,
No, go ahead.
I think part of the reason for the priority is you only have so much staff, so much time.
Yes, sir.
They're all on the list to be done, just how soon we get them done.
Yes, and yes, you're correct. And the Public Works crew quarters, just for the board, we've changed that. There hasn't been a real good defined scope of work. It's changed in the last year many times. So we think we have a target now to work on. So we can start working on developing that scope of work to let that out to bid.
And that would be still about 200,000.
Yes, I hope not to spend all of that, but we'll see.
Right.
Due to the Public Contracts Code, we have to let it out to bid before we actually embark on utilizing in-house staff. So that 200,000 was also predicated or developed a year and a half ago based on a different scope of work. So I've got a budget number. So basically, that's the budget number. We're going to try to make the project work within that budget.
Other questions? I'll open it to the public. Any questions?
I
Okay.
would move then that we approve the new list of priority projects based on the one-time money that's come in.
Do I have a second?
I'd second that.
Any other comments, questions? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay. Thank you, John.
John.
All right, we'll go to item 5D, discussion and possible action regarding notification to the county regarding a hazard tree removal project by the U.S. Forest Service in the El Dorado National Forest. We had invited the Forest Service to come speak to us about this, but they were not available today. So kind of as an alternative, Supervisor Oneto and I met with them and learned about, what this project is about. Supervisor Oneto, would you like me to turn the floor over to you?
What this is basically there's a lot of mortality in the forest. We've had the drought. I know we've been urging the Forest Service to mitigate a lot of these trees along these roads because it's where we go to play and recreate, and they're a hazard. And the Forest Service came up with a proposal to conduct roadside hazard tree removal along maintenance level 2, 3, 4, and 5 level roads in the National Forest. I think it's a very good thing, and they'd be removing the dead trees along about a 200-foot buffer on both sides of the road. That's where they're looking at taking trees out. So I think it'd be a very good action when you look at public safety, and also you get some of that dead wood out of there. You have less fuel in the ground, and fire is a pretty big danger to the counties, and I'm very supportive of the project. And in Amador, level 2 roads, you have 324 miles they're looking at. Level 3 is 98 miles, level 4 is 34 miles, level 5 is 3 miles. And that's kind of what they're looking at doing, and it'd be very good action.
To write a letter of support?
Yes.
Yes.
A good
Okay.
action of the Forest Service and a good action by this board to write a letter supporting their efforts.
Any
Saw a
other board? Yeah.
presentation by the consultant, I think that worked on this specific project at the ACCG meeting last Wednesday.
Right, right.
I think much a no-brainer that we should.
I realize that some people feel it's good to see the Forest Service finally doing this kind of work.
Oh, it is. I mean, like Bear River Road is
Yes.
county maintained road, it's a county road, and I thought the Forest Service would have cut a lot of the dead trees along there earlier. I expected them to, and last few times I went up there, it's kind of dismaying to see some of those dead trees bouncing off county guardrails. But so I think that it's high time they took action. I'm very pleased to see it.
Other board members? Pat?
It kind of fits in with our tree mortality plan. I thought it was a no-brainer, as Frank said.
Yeah, I think they should be working hand in hand with the Tree Mortality Committee, and the processes we're going through might be more efficient for them. I think we are working with Forest Service on some county roads, but all I can say is for them to start the commercial, non-commercial removal of trees, it's dead and dying trees, it's about time. I would say one thing on the Calaveras Amador Forestry Team letter that we received, that on the fourth paragraph, it starts out, the ENF, the El Dorado National Forest, is a large landowner in Amador County. They're not the landowner in Amador County. The people of the United States are the landowners.
I think they'd be happy
Good
if
point
making
of
that change.
clarification. Thank you. Jan, did you want to speak?
Good morning, supervisors and staff.
Morning.
Jan Bray, Calaveras Amador Forestry Team, and thank you. That's very true. We, as the taxpayers, are. I call it the lands of the government.
At least as far as
Some
I
would
know, they don't own the land yet, so.
Some would prefer lands of the people. Go ahead.
Just highlighting the points in the letter that we submitted for the record. It does provide for public safety, and it mirrors the actions by Amador County and their tree mortality efforts, so it ties right in with it. Also, we encourage commercialization of the product if it can be commercialized. A lot of facilities need logs right now, and it would offset the costs of the project. And along with that, we have consistently encouraged the Forest Service to maintain their level 3 to 5 forest roads, as many of those have been paid for previously with receipts from the forest, and without maintenance, they're falling apart right now. So, thank you very much.
Any questions? Okay. Thank you.
Well, one, Jan, you might be able to answer this with our committee, but they said their time frame is, what, 10 to 15 years? So is that just based on budget constraints that they have, or why is it stretching out so long? It is a lot of area that they're trying to treat.
That is a concern, because the trees aren't going to last that long, typically. Not the ones, if the fire-killed trees last longer than the beetle-killed trees. So they're rapidly deteriorating, and they're a hazard to fall at this point right now.
Why the lengthy time, though? Just because of their budget constraints and the amount of area they're trying to treat?
I think, if I remember correctly, there's 2,000 and some miles of road that they're dealing with. So it's a long-term project that they have going.
And they're not, the way I interpret this is that they're not waiting for 10 years to get started.
No, but their estimate of completion is 10 to 15 years.
It is, yes.
And also, it's possible maybe you're looking at kind of an ongoing action, I would think. Otherwise, you make an action for this year, and then next year, you're right back in the same spot where you have a hard time doing anything. This would give them ability to keep the roads clear and safe for a number of years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Jan. Any other public comment?
I'll make a motion then to either have staff or the chair draft a letter or write a letter of support for this hazard tree removal project by the U.S. Forest Service in the El Dorado National Forest.
Do I have a second?
I'll second that, but I think also we could basically, with a few minor changes, we could probably, if they didn't mind us plagiarizing their letter, we could probably use the Cal-Am forestry team's letter. Just a few minor changes.
That's okay with them.
Except for that one line.
With that, make that one correction that Cal-Am team likes that idea.
True.
And so we can probably make that change. Supervisor asks that Supervisor Forrester is asking about, as far as being a landowner, but like basically they're a steward for the people or something along that line. Would that work, Richard?
Okay, so we'll use the letter provided by the Cal-Am team with the change stipulated by Supervisor Forrester as a letter of support for the hazard tree removal project.
Sign on to their letter, basically.
Yeah, there's a couple other changes that things you want to take out to make it our letter, not their letter.
I would think so.
Last paragraph, especially, so.
Right.
We do a few changes to make it basically where it's coming. Either that or, Rich, could we just sign on to their letter? Would it have more effect if we actually wrote our own personal letter from the board?
I believe it would have more effect if we wrote our own. I got that message from Rick.
So take this and we'll modify it a little bit and all good.
Okay.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Now we are on item 5C, Carbondale Road over Willow Creek Bridge Replacement. Initial study, mitigated negative declaration.
5E.
Yeah,
5E, I'm sorry.
We just did 5D.
Yeah.
Morning, Jared Ranking with the Amador County Public Works. So the board, the agenda item you have before you is, it's one of our projects, one of our bridge projects. It's the bridge on Carbondale Road over Willow Creek, down there off of Highway 16 and Forest Home Road. I put together a short staff report for you. Just kind of went through some of the background and what we're doing and what the purpose of the agenda item is. And as you mentioned, we've gone through the environmental process. It's a federally grant-funded project, so it has Highway Bridge Program. So it was subject to both NEPA and CEQA. So over the past couple of years, we've been doing the technical studies for biological and cultural to support our findings in both NEPA and CEQA. As of January, Caltrans has approved the NEPA, so now we're here today to seek an approval for the CEQA portion of the environmental clearance. The existing bridge is about, I think it's 40 feet long, plus or minus. There's I don't know if you've been out there, but it's in pretty bad shape. It's a good candidate for a replacement. The wing walls are falling off, and it did sustain some damage from the big storms last year. So it would be a good project to replace. We're going to replace it. It's going to be a larger bridge. has to meet the requirements for hydraulics and other things. So that's where we're at. With the ISMND, we put it out for the draft out for public comment in January, January 12th. We had it out for 30 days, and comments closed on February 12th.
Did you receive comments?
We received 2 comment letters, one from the State Clearinghouse saying that we complied with CEQA, and the second letter was from the Regional Water Quality Control Board. It was basically a form letter, just reminding us to make sure we comply with, our construction general permit and 401 certification, and just the kind of the regular type things we would expect. So
you needed CEQA and NEPA approval?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's right. So what's the estimated cost of the project?
The construction cost is $1.8 million. The total project cost, it's around I think 2.3 or 2.4 million when you include our engineering and other
And
things.
what percentage of that will be covered by the federal government?
100%. So 100% funded.
That's a good thing.
Like a lot of money for a little country bridge.
Oh,
It doesn't
yeah,
get that
it
much
is.
travel, but
No question on that. The existing bridge was 36 feet long, 20 feet wide as far as the traveled surface, but new bridge is what, 80 feet long? I'm sure you've probably done all hydrology studies, but it seems like that bridge functioned for a lot of years. Why are we going that long a span? I think that'd run the cost up a lot.
It is a function of hydraulics. It's in a bad spot. There's a bend right there in the Willow Creek. We did consider maybe straightening out that bend, which would have caused the hydraulics, the water surface elevation to drop. But even that would have been even more expensive. Just because when you start moving creeks, it's the the Fish and Wildlife Service, they don't like that, and then there's a lot of mitigation involved with doing that. So keeping it on the existing channel more or less was a better option for us from that standpoint. And just the requirements for the hydraulics, a lot different than it was, 75, 80 years ago whenever the original bridge was built. I wish there was a way for me to tell you that it could be shorter and not as long, but that's what the data shows.
I guess probably being you're doing the federal program, they probably have certain conditions that you got to meet, I'm sure.
Yeah, but we can't compromise on the hydraulics. It's just one of those things where they're making the investment and they want to see it done to a certain standard. So
I know people have asked us, that little small country road, why'd you build such a big bridge? And I can't disagree with them, but part of it is if you want that funding, you got to build a type of bridge that they require.
Yeah, I mean, standards have changed over the years. Things are a little more stringent nowadays, so.
Yes.
when you talk about the deadlines, you say right-of-way appraisal work completed summer 18, acquisition possible by the end of 18. So the next line you say bridge replacement could be under construction by late spring 18. It should be 19. Right?
That's a typo. Yeah, the earliest I did catch that. It's a typo. It should be 19. More than likely, it would get pushed into the following year. But if we get through quick, we might be able to build it next year. But if not, it'll be the next year after that.
So is that whole road going to be shut down for that period of time?
Yes.
So you're talking 6 months or better?
I wouldn't know, not 6 months. I think you're probably looking in the 3 to 4 month range. So it could be less. It's a fairly simple bridge construction. So that was really what we were trying to accomplish with the bridge itself, was to get in and get out. It didn't make a whole lot of sense to do build it next to it and have a curve in there. We really just kind of wanted to replace the bridge
All I would do is, I would like to make sure that you put plenty of advance notice on there that it's going to be shut down, so people plan that. Some people may use that road for commuting, getting over to 16. They can find alternate ways, but as much advance notice as possible would be good.
And there are people that live there, too, that warned, or not warned, but notified.
Yeah, we did explain in the environmental document for traffic what we're going to do in terms of for the detour,
Oh, good.
signage and all that.
Where is the detour going to go?
Well, they either have to just go up Forest Home and around on 16 or
Right.
go up Carbondale the other way. So,
Okay.
you know, it's not too long of a detour. And there's only a few houses on the road.
Other questions from the board?
Yeah, did you contact that one landowner that was gonna be having some ground that's probably necessary to take to build that new bridge?
Initially, yes, we did send out right of entry requests. We had some early conversations with them, or at least they were notified. As of now, we haven't reached out to that property owner since then, no. So that's our next step. What we like to, before we had, it's at this point we're requesting approval for the environmental document and approval of the project. So we don't typically really want to engage the property owner about the right-of-way specifically until we know exactly what we're doing and we can answer all their questions.
But you have spoke with them about the project, and
I have not, but I believe our consultants have.
who was the property owner?
Bueller? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Other questions from the board?
No.
Frank? Oh, go ahead.
No, thank you.
Okay. Any questions from the public? Please feel free to come up.
I would move the staff recommendations to find the initial study, mitigated negative deck, and mitigated monitoring reporting program for the subject improvement project adequate and complete under the provisions of CEQA, adopt the initial study, mitigated negative deck, and mitigation monitoring and reporting program prepared for the project pursuant to CEQA guidelines, and 2, to approve the project and direct staff to complete the plan specifications for the project and to acquire necessary right-of-way.
Second.
Okay, any other questions? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. Thank you, Jared. Okay, we will go to item 5F, McCollum River Wild and Scenic Study Report. Discussion and possible action relative to approval of the chairman's signature on a letter outlining proposed comments regarding the subject draft study report issued by the California Natural Resources Agency. We will take approval and propose comments and direction to staff to format the letter for the chairman's signature.
I have a comment.
Yes?
Second paragraph, it's third line, as you know, in 2014, and it says 2017, the County Board of Supervisors opposed the McCollum being designated a wild and scenic river. I don't believe that occurred in 2017. Vote last year on a letter of support to make the state wild and scenic law congruent with the federal, the zone of influence, but we didn't have a vote as far as opposing it being designated a wild and scenic river that I recall.
I would say you may be correct. It appears you're correct on that to a certain degree. In 2017, there was a vote opposing Assembly Bill 975 for reasons including but not limited to the language of AB 975 greatly expands the value which river can be found eligible for designation. It greatly expands the immediate environment to a quarter mile each side of the river, which would greatly impact property owners. And I think there was a vote. It was, I believe, 3-2. I think it was Oneto, Crew, and Forrester were the ayes, and the noes were Supervisor Morgan Axe. That sound correct?
Yes. Yes.
Furthermore, 2015. There was other action taken by this board. Then on AB 142. Second, there was a motion by Morgan to delay action on the bill because it's been studied a couple times, twice before. That motion died for lack of second. Motion by Supervisor Forster, second by Supervisor Boitano, and carried to approve the chairman's letter of support relative to AB 142. Yeses, that was Forster, Boitano, Plasma, Neto, and one no, which is Supervisor Morgan. I believe, I know my reasons for supporting AB 142 at that time. It was, it seemed pretty clear to me that there was a lot of support in the legislature in Sacramento to just flat carry legislation to designate the McClellan River wild and scenic. I was concerned that it would not protect our water rights, not protect our access to water in that river, as far as a full designation, especially if it went federal. Provisions in the state wild and scenic that will allow the governor to request to be made federal. Also, I believe it'd be very detrimental if it went wild and scenic to property owners along the river. I still believe it would be. That was the reason why I voted to support AB 142, which along the way it got hijacked by, that's my belief, by the legislature in Sacramento. And they changed original intent from AB 142, which I believe was the intent of it was to make sure a study was done before it could even be looked at as before action could be taken by the legislature to declare it wild and scenic. So I think there could be, letter as it's written, there could be some. There may be an issue with the dates, but I know this board. I know the previous boards did take actions. I believe it was in 2014 opposing wild and scenic, and I think maybe we need to look at that a little bit closer.
Well, I would like us to look at that sentence about in 2014 and 17, since.
Yeah, you can. You could have a second sentence that says in 2017 the board looked at whatever the bill was to make the state law congruent with federal and oppose that, but as written, I don't think it's accurate.
Okay.
And I think what I'd like to see is maybe look back through our minutes and look at any actions taken in regards to wild and scenic, whether pro or whether against, and I'd like that put a matter of record, and I think basically this board has consistently been opposed to wild and scenic, and I think we should find those dates. They should be included in this letter and what the action was taken by this board. Previous boards.
That was when, by the way, for the public, Supervisor Neto and I worked on redrafting the original letter that was presented last time, and this is our second round now, and so it's not an easy letter to construct. But we should work on that paragraph, and putting in the facts is fine with me.
Yeah, I thought the dates had been put in, and I'd say they're incorrect, possibly.
Can I make a couple comments, please?
Yes, Supervisor Forster.
Might take a couple minutes, but on the first page, I have some very small grammatical changes, but in the first page on the bottom, when it talks about rowing camp, I think it should make some reference there. It talks about maintenance, repair, operations of rowing camp. mining company and its associated structures and facilities. I think it should mention there the recreational, do talk about maintenance, repair, operations, but they are as much a recreation company as a mining company, and maybe even more so now, so I think it should make some reference to the recreational opportunities they provide there.
Great.
On the next page, make just a, hate to call it general, but I'm going to call it general because that's the way it's stated throughout the document. It repeatedly makes statements like on page 2 under effects on water uses, land uses, existing uses. The uses would generally would not be affected by designation. You know, that's like a lawyer's heyday to see words like that. Okay, if it's generally not going to be affected, why didn't the report say when it would be affected? If you go to the next page, under regulation, historically have not expanded land use regulatory powers. Next line down, economic impacts would not be expected to significantly affect. Later in that paragraph, no or negligible impacts on the regional or local economies would be expected. Well, they're never expected until you get a challenge. And that's the problem with using words like generally not be affected or would not be expected to be affected. That's a big problem for me because never expected, but it's all dependent on influence and objections from others. So there's in the report, I think it should have been specific. Okay, if it's not expected or generally if it's not going to be affected, when would it be affected?
Well,
And then on the last, if I could finish, please.
Yes.
On the last page, where it says, finally, we would like to note our pride in you, Mr. Wall. I think we should restate, served as the manager of this important study to served as the manager of this legislatively authorized study.
Okay.
I'll make one more comment on, and Catherine Everett provided a lot of documentation. I appreciate it. On the that documentation from the Water and Power Law Group, PC, and they made somewhat of the same comments. State Water Resources Control Board may grant applications for additional water rights. Well, that's all dependent and contingent upon are there protests and is there litigation that comes up. Again, the free-flowing condition of the river is a moving target. I appreciate this law group trying to define what it means now. But one statement they make is the Foothill Conservancy and Friends of the River support a designation for the Moke River, for the Moke that would permit Amador Water Agency and potentially others to fully exercise contractual and other rights subject to definite plans of development at the time of designation. I think that's our goal. If we don't want to put something like a 30-year sunset clause for review, and as I understand that's out of the question, then we need some specific language to tie it down so that, at least for Amador County, all of our appropriated rights can be used down the road.
What is that document you read that from?
This is information, legal analysis of state wild and scenic designations and water board regs. It's something that Catherine sent to me. She sent it on Monday, February 19th, so I think it's readily available. Okay. But it's a legal opinions from this law group. And I do appreciate getting the information. But it does make statements in there. I know good faith efforts have been made by all parties to sit down and try and hammer out language on things like diversion points. My feeling is those can be successful. Each side's going to have to give a little bit, but I think they should sit back down at the table and try and resolve that issue. Otherwise, frankly, for me, I'm going to have a hard time tying up the water rights on that river into perpetuity unless we know we have the ability to go in and utilize our water rights, not for our generation, probably not for the next 2 or 3 generations, but 80, 100 years down the road. I don't think you want to tie that up unless we have language that's going to allow you to utilize those water rights.
Okay, so you can provide that language, what you would like to see in this letter?
Well, basically, they provided it, and I think we're going to get some more comments relative to it today, I would assume, but this letter has very good language on what Foothills Conservancy and Friends of the River feel can happen, but negotiations have always broke down in the past, and without having something down on paper, you're going to have legal challenges in the future to stop those diversions, possibly stop those diversions from happening. That's my humble opinion.
Well, I certainly prefer active language than questionable language, so yes, Pat.
Madam Chair, to further on what Richard said, I have pretty much made it clear over the years that anything in perpetuity bothers me. And I think the sunset clause is still, I didn't see anywhere in the study where that was ever vetted by either side other than turned down as a deal breaker by its proponents. But I was very disappointed it wasn't at least mentioned as a special provision to look at. Because as Richard said, for 20 or 40 years it may not be any difference, but in 60 years it might. And I envision at the 20-year mark, honestly, if both sides are doing what the Wild and Scenic is supposed to do, it'll be about a 2-hour meeting and they'll continue on for another 20 years. But to expose it to the light of day every 20 years protects both sides. It's not just a pro or against. Because maybe the stringency of the ordinance isn't good enough 60 years from now. Or the water rights come into, and I'm from the water rights side, so I just don't see where a peek at it every 20 years is a real problem, and we should list it at least as one of our concerns.
Okay, well, let me hear what the rest of the board has to say, and then I've got a comment about your comment. Frank,
Yeah, just in response to Supervisor Forrester's comments, a couple of things as far as land uses. I'm glad that we are asking for clarification on Roaring Camp. But in general, all of these studies, the Wolk study and and this one, there are not, glaring examples of where land use or private property rights have been. I think the general comment, or using the term general, is more than appropriate. Also, in the economic impacts, instead of just looking at the downside, what about the positive impacts to our local economy and the designation of this as a way to bring more tourists to the area and to improve that. So, I am concerned that we have a 20,000 acre foot per year water right, and I'd like that not to be limited in any way. So we are asking for special provisions in that area. We'll have to wait and see what they say, but I think beyond that, we may not really have other water rights, or we would have to apply for those. I know there was potentially another one on Bear River, an additional water right, but beyond that, I don't think there's other water to be had.
Well, one thing I would like to say in there, under their study, it talked about there would be negligible economic effects from the designation. So I don't see where the Wild and Scenic is going to be. That's what their study said. It said negligible economic effects from the designation. So it's not going to be a great big boon to tourism. And also, one thing I do agree with you highly, if there's not glaring examples of Wild and Scenic having an effect on property owners or on the surrounding area, I don't see why it'd be such a big deal to make sure we have some safeguards. So, you know, they shouldn't mind if it doesn't affect those. Well, why should they mind if we put it in writing saying it will not be affected?
Well, we made that comment in our response, so let's wait and hear from them. I'm in favor of, in the specific case of Roaring Camp, of asking for special provision.
No, and I agree with you, and I think it should also be, a special provision, and it should be written fairly well, very broad, I'd say, and it should also talk about, they don't just do recreation there, they also do mining. That is a part of their recreation, and I don't see it, would that fall under the operation of Roaring Camp Mining Company? I think we should talk about mining, because that's one of the big draws they have there, and it should be specifically mentioned as is a recreation, and I agree it would be good to have that special provision. Also have it a little anyway, I thought Supervisor or Chairperson Morgan and I had looked at the provisions, and we had come up with the provisions that we would put in the letter, and I guess we've had a misunderstanding, because I see there is 4 original special provisions. I think that's an error in the letter. There's actually 3 original special provisions that were included in the study, not 4. But I thought we'd had a meeting of minds that we'd have we would accept the water agency's 6. They had 6 special provisions, the 3 original that were modified, plus an additional 3, for a total of 6. I would like to see, I think it was February 20th, 2018. Does that sound right, Mr. Mancebo? Your latest edition of the special provisions. I would like to see that it's titled CNRA's Proposed Special Provisions in Chapter 7 of the AB 142 study, with proposed changes by Amador Water Agency, Calaveras Water District, Calaveras Public Utility District, and Jackson Valley Irrigation District. I'd like to see that included as special provisions in our letter, along with an additional provision, which would be probably number 7, which would be Roaring Camp, and also possibly an 8th, if the board would be so willing. I was contacted by a property owner. It's Erickson Family Trust. They said they have 2 parcels. They said there's no way they wanted to be in wild and scenic designation. So I'd like to see their 2 parcels also included in our request. And just for the record, the 3 additional provisions the Water Agency had asked for, which would be special provision number 4. What this was, neither the governor nor an employee of a state agency or department shall apply to a secretary, department, agency, or other entity of the federal government for a designation of any portion of the Columbia River watershed as a component of the National Wild and Scenic River Systems under the Federal Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. Special provision number 5 is basically the same, but neither the governor nor an employee of a state agency or department shall expend funds preparing, filing, or otherwise submitting an application to a secretary, department, or other entity of the federal government for a designation of the McCollum. And special provision number 6 was to the extent that these special conditions conflict with other provisions of this chapter, this subdivision shall control. What's kind of interesting here is I've heard people say there is no intent to go federal wild and scenic, and the state wild and scenic is very minimus effect on people. And if that is true, I don't see any reason why anyone would want to object to these provisions. And it's been widely talked about, I think accepted by both sides, that the federal designation has a lot more impact in the state. So let's see what happens.
Okay, thank you. Let me just share that when we sat down, and when Supervisor Neto and I sat down with my original letter that I had presented, and by then he and I had both received proposed changes to the special provisions from the water agencies. And I did not agree with those provisions. I mean, I'm just one person in a board of 5. I realize that. And then I went to the UMRA meeting last week, and it was quite an interesting meeting. All the water agencies were there and very vocal. And what came out of that meeting was a motion that I'd like to read to you. Motion 818, that UMRA supports and appreciates the transparency and effort that the California Natural Resources Agency has made on the AB 142 Bigelow study. While listening to stakeholders, considers that UMRA's investment in the study was worthwhile and hopes stakeholders work together to complete the special provisions that will achieve broad stakeholder support and conclude with inclusion in the state wild and scenic system. This was made by Director Farrington, seconded by Director Gonzalez, and earned a voice vote by 6 yea, no nays, and 2 abstentions, one of which was mine, and one of which was Terry Woodrow, supervisor from Alpine County. And the main reason we gave for not voting for that motion, which frankly I was inclined to do, was that this board had not acted on our letter yet. And that was the same reason that Supervisor Woodrow did not act. What this says to me is, especially the part that hopes stakeholders work together to complete the special provisions that will achieve broad stakeholder support. I don't think that's been done so far. And I don't think just including the proposed special provisions that the water agency has presented, and maybe it was all of the agencies too. I mean, I'm surprised that that motion, that fact didn't get presented, and that this motion is pretty clear. It says water agency special provisions need to be discussed and further finalized by stakeholders. And to my knowledge, that has not been done.
Well, it has been done, but negotiations broke down because of non-acceptance of the wording. So it all comes down to how restrictive is the wording. That's why I made the comment that both sides are going to have to be somewhat flexible. But to me, to accept anything like wild and scenic, it's got to have language that protects our water rights and our appropriated rights forever. And I don't like the possibility of having a federal designation, I'll tell you that, but I think that's going to be the next thing that gets asked for if the wild and scenic designation is granted.
Well, I agree with you that we want some reassurances that federal designation will not be asked for. I'm good with that.
I don't know how you assure that, because I think that's a pretty simple process, and it can go from the governor on.
We had that in the special provisions, though.
Well, I think another river in the California Wild and Scenic Rivers Act prevents federal designation from occurring, I believe. Yeah. Okay. So that can be done.
Spend it until it's asked for.
So part of it, and I appreciate all of your comments, and Pat, what you had to say, yes. Part of my challenge in finalizing and signing this letter is that the effects on water uses, land uses, and existing facilities section is really just verbatim from the report. And so, I mean, I guess we could say we don't like that you're using the words generally and sort of not specific words, but
I'm not saying take the language out. All I'm saying is there are consequences to that kind of language. It's coming from the report verbatim, but there are consequences to things being very general, and for things that you wouldn't expect to happen. Those are, like I said, those are a lawyer's playground.
So would you like, if we can get agreement on a letter, would you like this board to put a small paragraph in there saying that? Saying we prefer the language be more definitive?
I think to mitigate those types of scenarios, I think you need definitive language to protect our ability to have diversion from that river to get our appropriated water rights down the road.
Okay, but you didn't exactly answer my question. Would you like us to add language in there that shares that opinion.
In the provisions, I think that would be appropriate. Special provisions.
Well, it sounds to me like we got a lot more work to do on this letter. Good thing they moved the deadline to March 8th, by the way, for those of you that don't know that.
There is, and yeah, I'll go back to my position. I believe we'd had an agreement on that, but if we didn't, I would like to talk about AWA special provisions. I think 1 through 6. I think we should include them in our letter. And also something I would personally like to see in our letter, I would like to see a statement that we are opposed to wild and scenic.
I will not agree to either of those.
I understand that. We haven't got the vote yet. I'm just saying where I'm at.
Okay. Let me open it. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I finish?
Yes.
I would like to have a position that we're opposed to wild and scenic. And if they're going to have to, if it somehow we draft in a letter, if they're proposing wild and scenic, I'd like to see what Supervisor Crew had talked about. Have a sunset clause. And if it's really a problem, I think Pat is absolutely right. It would very well go away. If it's not a problem, people love it, it'll probably go on for another 20 years. I would like to have those conditions there. And also, if they're looking to do a wild and scenic, how about, say, put forth an option, would they consider a Mill Creek or Deer Creek type of designation?
Okay.
Or,
I might agree with some of your comments, Brian, but I don't think based on our agenda item today, we're talking about the draft study report. I don't know if it's the time to take a position again on up or down on wild and scenic. That will come down the road, but I think now is the time to ask for inclusions or comments based on the draft study report.
On the report. That's correct, and I'll tell you, if we can't generally agree today, or maybe even have a special session if we need to negotiate this letter again and see if we can do it, I would rather that we not send a letter, period, if we can't agree.
And I think that would be the worst thing.
I do too, but we're not getting very far today.
well, okay. We're here to have discussions, and I mean...
Okay, let me open it to the public.
Madam Chair, you want to take a break first?
Sure,
because
let's take a break.
Public comment could go on for a while.
Please stick around. We'll take a break
7
for
minutes.
5 minutes. We'll reconvene at 10:30. 10 minutes. 10 minutes. let's call the meeting back to order. And I have two announcements to make. One, we are going to go to the public hearing on the Nexus study right now. That I'm told shouldn't be more than 20 or 30 minutes. And then we will go back to public comment on the AB 142 issue. The second thing I want to announce is that I mentioned by mistake that it's KVGC website that is video streaming this meeting. It is not. It is KVGC Facebook. So if you couldn't find it, that's why. Okay. I will open the public hearing. Yeah. General Services Administration, discussion and possible action to update the Nexus study for the jail.
Madam Chair, members of the board, John Hopkins, General Services Director again. Hopefully you've all had a chance to read my memo. It is a little longer than a page because it tried to encompass
The history.
summarizing for you the things that have gone on since about 2004, 2005. But obviously the Nexus update was needed. The board talked about that about a year ago after we got established. And today I have for you to review that updated Nexus proposal that was done by Goodwin and Associates, and estimates for a baseline for the 20 beds that are predicated in here were done by Naughton Lewis. I do want the board to remember that this is a living document, and it can change half a dozen times a year or every 5 years. It just depends on the county's needs as they move through time, because it's a projection on that growth and the needs that you're going to need by a certain date. In this particular case, it targets 2034, and the reason it does that is because our needs assessment that we did through SB 863 here with Naughton Lewis targeted trend data information based on 2014, 2015. So you move 20 years out, that's where you get that from. It takes into consideration the 40 beds that are being developed under SB 863. It also takes into consideration the loan that the board had taken out to buy Wicklow at $1.8 million, and I will get into that. So in your packet, you should have my memo. You should have the updated Nexus study. You should have attachments A, B, and C. Just want to make sure the board has all that information, okay? Because I'll refer to it every once in a while.
Hey, John, could I just ask you, so everything that's being done now is being paid out of SB 863? Is that the current project?
No, it is being paid for out of state funds and CFF funds. Okay?
Is there any match to that?
There's an in-kind match. Yeah. So, and by the way, Victor Erzik, who did the study, who's done the study since 04, 05 with Goodwin Associates, he is here in case you have any questions regarding the study. Also, Eric Fadness, our architect of record for the jail project, is also here should you have any questions about the needs assessment or that study as we go through this. So you should have those items in your packet. Any questions up to this point that you have? If not, I'll keep going. In the analysis, as I said, it goes through a history, and I tried to summarize that as best I could to give you an idea of where we've been and what you've done. Ultimately, it results in that little table that's in my memo that shows the projections for the beds that are needed in the future. You will notice that the significance in the change has been because we are now no longer targeting Wicklow. We are targeting 20 beds someplace else, and we're no longer targeting 217-bed jail facility. The other change that's occurred is the projections in population. They were notable, as in 2011, the population growth by 2040 was projected at a little over 25,000, and with the data we have today, by 2023, which is what this Nexus study is predicated on, has a population growth of about 3,600. So that changed those numbers significantly. and you're no longer targeting, that 217-bed project targeted 72 beds. We're targeting 7 in this study. And when I say 7, Brian's looking at me, the reason for that is if you go to the very last page of the Nexus study, you will see that there are 20 beds there that are in the study, but 13 of them are carved out. And the reason 13 of them are carved out is because if a casino was built, a second casino, they are obligated to pay for that future growth, those beds. So we take that out of the fee. You'll also notice that on that same table, it shows that $11.95 million cost. The 7 beds calculates out to that $4.1 million. You'll see $1,052,000 in there that's been deducted out of that. That is part of that, the monies that have already been collected that were used to buy Wicklow Way. So since you've already collected it, and we've already, obviously it's got to come out of that fee. So really, those 7 beds in the future, you've got a target of about $3.1 million, and the rest is just general math. Attachment A in your packet that you have there shows a baseline comparison for how we came up with the escalation cost for this project. We met with the jail committee, the sheriff, and CAO, and we looked at what we could do, what seemed to be reasonable at this point in time. And so this shows you a projection of 1.5%. Escalation, a projection of 2.5, and a projection of 5%. Now, the state, for its projects, mandates 5% for its projects. But after we looked at the economic climate, the uncertainty of future impacts, and the jail committee's recommendation to try to keep the fee reasonable within what was already applied, we used a 1.5 consideration for escalation. So that table there shows you the differences that jail fee would be if that recommendation was increased from 1.5 or greater. Okay? Attachment B gives you estimates. That page merely shows the cost estimates that we had received from Nocton Lewis and what those cost estimates would be for those beds using different escalators in that factor. And then the last table there, attachment C, shows what the existing fee is currently in that top table and what the fee would have been if you had just applied the 3.7% CCI this year and if we hadn't made any change to what we were doing. So when you take a look at that and you look at the 1.5 escalator, the fee actually, in comparison, actually goes down a little bit, even though it moves forward a little bit more from what it's at now. So with that, any questions of our architect, our consultant, or of me?
Yeah, you said the fee goes down a little bit. I thought a fee goes up.
It actually goes up from what it currently is, but if you had, usually typically every year we apply a CCI. If you had applied the CCI,
Okay, all right.
it would go, yeah, it's
Yeah,
actually less than.
I thought you said it was going down the chart, and it's not.
No, no.
Okay.
Sorry.
John?
Yes, sir.
I noticed that, I guess, in the year, I think 2034, I don't have it in front of me, we need about 140 beds.
Correct.
And right now there's 76, and then there's this current
We're going to go to 116.
remodel is going to be 40, so that will take you to, what, 116, and then another 20, so it's only 136 ultimately.
Correct.
Instead of 140.
Now that 140 represents a peak, so we're right on target with where we should be.
We can
The other,
put some rollaways in?
yeah, yeah. So the other thing that the board
Bunk beds.
should really pay attention to is that if that casino is never built, even though you're going to collect to 2034, you're only collecting on 7 beds. The likelihood of you actually doing anything to build 7 beds without some other management tools in place to mitigate those circumstances is probably unlikely. So.
And then I noticed, like on page 7 of the report, area of benefit. Basically, it says that if some of the jurisdictions within the county don't comply with the assessment, or may not actually assess the assessment, and is this going to be a problem? Has this been a problem?
Where are you looking at?
Area benefit, so,
Page 7 of the study.
7.
Top
It's
paragraph.
also page 430.
Well, and that's a question for the board. Yes, so we've talked about this before with previous boards. The area benefit is the entire county. That includes the cities, right? The cities have not always been on board with adopting this fee due to the methodology or the approach or just because it's another fee, right? So, but they are encouraged to do so because the area benefit is the entire county, and unless I'm mistaken, the cities don't have a jail. So they have an impact to the jail. And currently, right now, I would say the growth, the majority of growth is in Ione, primarily. I think when I talked to Steve Stokes, just messing around, we had, I got a factor in here of how many permits were issued countywide in the last year versus what Ione has submitted, and Ione has got the lion's share of that currently right now. I know we've got a development in Plymouth that's going on right now, but Mr. Reeder, under a development agreement, is paying those impact fees.
So again, I'm sorry. You still
Are
have
they
a
not
question?
paying them in Ione?
No. They do. We do have a development agreement for, I believe, one development. I can't remember what development it is, but that hasn't kicked off yet. But development fees for Castle Oaks, Wildflower, those types of developments are not, the city has not agreed to that. So we've had the sheriff talk to them. I've talked to them. I believe Supervisor Forster has been down there before. And this may be far more palatable this time because this is a new nexus study. And I know that when we launched the needs assessment this time using Nocton Lewis, we wanted them to really take a hard look at reasonable numbers. And I think that's here.
So I just want to be really clear, especially for the audience and myself, that these fees would be what we usually refer to as mitigation fees on when people come in and get a permit for a new development or
Yes.
a new house.
Yes.
Or, yeah, so it's like the school and the ACRA mitigation fees.
Be
Right.
commercial too, and industrial.
Right.
Yeah, it's triggered on growth. So if there's
Right.
no permit, there's no fee.
Right. Questions of the board?
You know, one thing I think it's maybe in the future we should look at talking to the cities that aren't collecting that fee because they do use our jail.
They do.
It's something I'd like to have looked at in the future.
All right. Can you give me a second here? I know I have.
We've given every justification to Ione, and they're pretty much the lone holdout. And specifically, their mayor is very adamant that he thinks that the impact fees are high enough in Ione and doesn't want to have additional fees, the county fees on top of that. And I think some of that stems from other feelings that he has too. So.
You may. Just to give you an idea, the cities that have developments that have actively, that will have permits between Plymouth and Ione, which includes the Wildflower, Castle Oaks, Gold Village, and Riverland and Kenningson developments, are 185. Out of the 185, there are 42 that are under construction or done with their construction, and folks occupying those dwellings in and around the Ione area. The county in the last year issued 28 single-family permits and 4 commercial. So Ione's got the lion's share of what's going on right now in development.
So what if Ione stays in their current position? And
Well, it's a
never
question
wants
for
to
the
pay?
board. If the board wants me to, revisit this issue with the cities, I can certainly do that. That's up to the board. They do have an impact. That's up to the board.
At this time, I think it's going to be fruitless with Ione. Not sure about the rest of them. The rest of the cities pay something, some kind of capital facilities fee, but I think the mayor is right. Mayor of Ione is right anyway at this point that they've approved most of the developments and the development agreements have been signed, so capital facilities fee could not be put into any one of those agreements.
Right, you can't go back.
Yeah, no, that's true. I'm just
okay.
ongoing.
Right.
I mean, looking forward.
Right.
Other board questions?
Just a comment, I think, right on the second paragraph beginning, sometimes we have to make our best guess and estimates on what's going to happen in the future. It's just like turning back the $22 million grant from the state. We looked at the implications, and it was right to apply for that grant, but I think it was right to turn it back once the state made new laws on the books, which had an impact on the amount of inmates or prisoners that would be coming into Amador County Jail. It really lessened the load on what we needed at present and in the future. But as John said here, the Nexus study very much, and all the other documents are very much living documents that are fluid, and we have to kind of dodge the punches as they come and make our best estimates.
Correct.
So what would happen if we didn't approve this version of the Nexus study?
Well, I think it establishes a pretty fair baseline, especially at 1.5 escalation. If you didn't, then you ultimately run the risk in the future of whatever those future developments are, of not collecting enough money for those future impacts and having that come out of the general fund. I will remind the board, I've said this before, right now we're in a good space because this particular 40-bed project we've got going on right now still is not using a dime out of the general fund. And for a capital project for a municipality, a public entity to do that is unheard of most of the time. So there's a good reason for that. And you'll also notice that in that summary page on the last page of that report, why it only says 1.52 and it doesn't say 1.8, which is what the loan was for, is the board knows we've had discussions before about escalation cost, right? We're going into being delayed 7-8 months now. That range for escalation was anywhere from $600,000 to $900,000. So I took $750,000 and reserved that for escalation of fees that we've already collected. That's why it's not shown as a deduction in that fee, because I couldn't support the rest of it anyway. Hopefully that makes sense. Okay.
Other board questions before I open it?
Sure.
Okay. Any comments, questions from the public? Done.
You want to say hello to the consultant?
Hello, consultants. Thank you for coming.
They've done good work, so I appreciate their efforts.
You know, one thing I will say is I think having an updated Nexus study is good, because otherwise, if we don't have an updated Nexus study, it's possible somebody could challenge the fees we charge, and which could really be a real mess down the road. So I think the work that was done, I think, is good, and is something that we can, that will withstand the, I would think withstand a challenge.
Absolutely. That's good.
And so with that, I'll go ahead and make a motion to approve the updated Nexus study by Goodwin Consulting.
Just 1 second. Greg?
I just wanted to add something. If the board recalls, this was on the agenda the end of January. And at that time, we received a letter from the neighbor's attorney, and the neighbors spoke, and they raised some CEQA issues related to the adoption of the Nexus. We've looked at those issues, and what the board is doing right now is not approving a project, any specific project. It's creating a funding mechanism to capture the impacts of growth and ensuring that they will pay for whatever you need to build at some point in the future based on the growth. And so under CEQA, which is triggered by projects, they've defined project to specifically exclude adoption of funding mechanisms like this. So if you see in the resolution itself, it specifically has a whereas that what you're doing is approving a funding mechanism. You're not specifically approving any particular project or committing to build any particular project. As Mr. Hopkins indicated, this might change. There's no particular project you're going to build. It just creates that nexus between fee that you charge for new development.
Yeah, so case in point, if you look in the first paragraph of the analysis where I said at the time fees were implemented in 2005, no site had been identified. So it's as Mr. Gillot is talking about, you don't have, you haven't embarked on designating a project right now. It's projections.
I just wanted to make sure that that was in
For the record.
in the record.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
So it should be stated as the recommendation on page 3 of John's memo. Is that correct?
The recommendation should, yes, based upon board feedback, approve the updated Nexus study by Goodwin Consulting Group and adopt the resolution to adjust the jail CFF in accordance with the updated Nexus study dated January 4th, 2018, effective March 1st, 2018.
Hey, that's it. I'll make that my motion. Keep it simple.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay. Oh, yes.
Before you vote, I don't believe you closed the public hearing.
You know, I didn't. You're right.
Move to close public
I
hearing.
apologize. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor of closing the public hearing, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Public hearing is closed. Now I should take the motion after the public hearing is closed, correct? Okay.
Probably true.
So,
So, anyway, I'll make a motion we approve the updated Nexus study by Goodwin Consulting Group and also adopt the resolution to adjust the jail CFF in accordance with the updated Nexus study dated January 4th, 2018, effective March 1st, 2018.
Second.
okay. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, John. Gentlemen.
All right.
Thank you.
We will go back to open the mic, so to speak, to public comment on issue 5F, Palm River Wild and Scenic Study Report.
Good morning. It still
Morning.
is.
Morning, Gene.
Morning.
So I just wanted to kind of provide some additional information and maybe some clarifications. Last Thursday, the Amador Water Agency voted to support the recommendations of the California Natural Resource Agency's study with the inclusion of special provisions that had been drafted and supported by the local water agencies. They went on, though, to commit to continue to work towards trying to gain further support for those provisions by continuing to adjust or to refine those provisions accordingly. I believe in the local agencies include Jackson Valley Irrigation, Calaveras County Public Utilities District, Calaveras County Water District, and the Amador Water Agency. And we've tried to maintain kind of a common front and work on provisions and comments that were specific to the recommendations of the study to be uniform. And so we've always maintained that uniform front. We believe that, and I certainly don't want to speak for Ms. Evett, but I think that there's not a huge disparity amongst the difference in what the water agencies are seeking in those special provisions versus Foothill Conservancy and perhaps other stakeholders. We're hoping that we can continue to work on those. We're not there today, but it is our goal to continue to work towards and try to attempt to have something that we can live with between the water agencies and other stakeholders. In the presentation by the Natural Resource Agency before UMRA, in their recommendations, yes, they are recommending that the 5 segments be recommended for designated as wild and scenic, but they also upheld that there should be special provisions in there, and that they define those special provisions to be 1, to protect the existing water rights, 2, to protect future water rights, 3, to protect kind of the operations for PG&E, their operations and maintenance of their facilities, or they included a provision that would kind of prohibit the governor from seeking the federal designation, and then they kind of had a catch-all in there about kind of some potential others. But they made it very clear that they're still working on taking their comments, and with those comments, that could have adjustments to the study and as well as to their provisions that they may be asking for and putting out there. I think with the direction that the study has gone, and we were financially engaged in that study, we think it was the right thing to do. The study has come out with that recommendation. I think it's likely that that will proceed forward at some point in the future towards legislation. Been our position to ensure that there are provisions that would accompany any future legislations, as well as a report that provide for the adequate protection of the water existing and future. And that's been our position, I think, all along from the Water Agency, and I don't think we've ever really veered from that direction. Happy to answer questions or come back later as necessary.
But you stated the language very general, but as far as the diversion point, it's somewhat specific, isn't it? The actual request that's made in the provision?
No.
Then how could you assure, if you're keeping it at a 30,000-foot level, how could you assure that what you need for a diversion point is satisfied in the future?
The actual provisions that are currently in the recommended study provide for kind of a definition of an adverse effect on the river, and it's identified just very broadly as a significant impediment to the flow, and that helps give us some comfort that if we just take a small amount of water out at some point, and we're assuming that we would seek a project outside of the designated segments, perhaps above it, and if so, then we would look to see, does it have an impact to the segments below? Currently, I don't think, and if there's a wild and scenic designation, that there could potentially be a dam constructed in the segments. I mean, that's what the wild and scenic, that's what it boils down to in my mind, is the prevention of building a dam or a large diversion from the river itself in the segments. Outside of the segments is where we would need to concentrate for future water supplies.
Even outside of the segments, there cannot be an effect on all of those measures, whether the free-flowing nature of the river and all of the other things that they cite.
The values? Yeah.
Correct. And so I think that's why it's important not to rely on what's happened in the past, but to provide provisions that hopefully the study would recommend, and that in the future those would be utilized in any future law, and that those give us the comfort that we seek, that we would be able to, one, continue to use the existing water rights that we have, fully utilize them, as well as seek additional water as it's needed.
Other board questions?
Yeah, I have one. I think when Supervisor Morgan and I were talking about this letter, I think we talked to you about special provision number 4 and special provision number 5, and we were looking to join those into one provision, possibly. Is that correct?
That is correct.
I think you said that you would rather see us use a language as was put forth in other wild and scenic designations.
That was my comment at the time, yes.
Let me just
Okay,
interrupt
thank
you for a second. I just want to be clear that 4 has language preventing the governor or other state officials from applying for federal wild and scenic designation. Number 5 says no money may be spent by them for seeking that other designation. That's why when Supervisor Neto and I were looking at that language, we said, why don't we just put it together? But then Mr. Mancebo said it's separated, so.
Correct. So we thought it'd probably be better just to have them go forward with having this as separate provisions.
Right.
There are two trains of thoughts. One is that utilizing language as close as absolutely as possible to other provisions that are already in the act would be more acceptable than drafting up new language. The other train of thought is use as few words as possible in your special
That was our
provisions.
approach,
And,
but it didn't work.
well, I think it's, you know, since my discussions with the Natural Resource Agency, it's kind of a combination of the two.
Ah, there you go. Other
When
questions?
we were in negotiations, by the way, Brian, they're looking for you at the roundabout dedication. So when we were in,
A little more important.
when we were in negotiations with Foothill Conservancy and I think it was Friends of the River too, and their lawyers on the designation of wild and scenic, we reached a loggerhead, and basically negotiations stopped at that point. Does that give you any confidence for the future? I mean, you're saying we hope that the legislature looks at what we need. I'm not so sure that's going to happen if the language that you wanted before was not acceptable. Why would it be acceptable to go into legislation now?
Well, I would have to, what I would hope is, and what I can guarantee is that we're committed to trying. I can't guarantee what the outcome will be, but I'm committed, and the water agency is committed, and I think the other water agencies are committed to at least sit down and discuss. First step, in my opinion, is to work with the Natural Resource Agency to try to modify their provisions or to enhance those provisions that give us that comfort that we're seeking. That's not a guarantee that will be in the law, but I think that it at least stands out as that's their intent. These are the recommendations that they have. And I think that if there is a bill that gets picked up, I mean, we would push hard to make sure that those recommendations are included. Again, there's no guarantee that that will happen. But I think it's a better chance if they're in the recommendations. If we can have broad support for special provision language, then I think it's more likely that the Natural Resource Agency would be willing to put it in. And I'd much rather have a broad-based support for that language rather than having multiple stakeholders compete with what they're asking to have put in there, into the language of the report, or more specifically into their recommendations.
You heard that language that I read earlier from the law firm Water and Power Law Group, PC. Does that give you any confidence that Foothill Conservancy and Friends of the River support a designation for the MOAC that would permit Amador Water Agency and potentially others to fully exercise contractual and other subject rights to definite plans of development at the time of the designation? Now that puts in a new wrinkle to it, that there has to be development requiring that new water be developed out of the contractual water rights be developed. Not sure that language is exactly what you're looking for.
I mean, that's SB 1199 discussions, and to me that doesn't fit. Today, we are much, much closer than we were in our discussions from the SB 1199. And my hope is to focus on what we have today, what the Natural Resource Agency has put forth today, what we can achieve in that study, and not necessarily rely on past of 1199 and those discussions.
And that's kind of where I'm coming from, is that I think we could accept wild and scenic if we had some assurances, and both sides want assurances. So, but that requires sitting down back at the table and hammering those out.
Agreed.
I assume that that's what you were saying you are in the process of doing right now.
Yes. I mean, it was only Thursday and Friday of last week.
I know, I was there.
And so there is absolutely an intent to sit down and have further discussions. And as I said, the Water Agency Board is committed to doing that.
Also, maybe there's a letter here from Foothill Conservancy. It talks about data provided by the California Natural Resources Agency and Water Control Board, regulators, California Research Bureau. It concludes that wild and scenic reservoir designation continues to have negligible impact on the regulation of regulated rivers. So I guess that's a point that's being, a viewpoint that's out there. One theme recurring in all interviews is that the impact of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is limited by regulatory overlap with several other existing state and federal laws. This is CEQA and both U.S. and California Endangered Species Act, and then it goes on furthermore. Other environmental regulations such as CEQA would have more impact on a proposed project than the California Wild and Scenic River Act. And what I'm mulling over in my mind, if all these things are true, then why are we having such a big fight over having some language put in there to protect our water rights, our access to water, to Roaring Camp, and for that matter, other than just some language maybe preventing a dam, why do we even need it? I keep wondering what's going on. If all these things are true, then why do we need an additional layer of bureaucracy?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Other
Gene.
public comment?
Catherine Evett, Foothill Conservancy. I'll use my own pen so I don't make anybody sick. I've been going to so many meetings. A couple of things I'd like to say. First of all, I don't think we're having a big fight right now about the language in the special provisions. We are willing to work with the water agencies on this special provision language. The Resources Agency looked at special provisions that are in law now and picked the ones they thought were most appropriate for the McCullough based on the concerns of all the stakeholders. And we were okay with those special provisions. Now the Water Agency has some issues with them. We're trying to understand their issues. We have pledged to meet and work with them and talk with them. I think we're very much closer to agreement than we were in 2014. And in part of the reason for that is that now we have this study that has laid out a number of facts, not just perspectives, on what wild and scenic designation actually does. I think a point that Gene made that's very important is that Amador County just completed, Amador Water Agency and JVID just completed a long-term water range study, or long-term study that does not include on-stream dams on the McCullough. So nobody in Amador County or Calaveras County is planning an on-stream dam on these 37 miles of river. But my group was the one that had to go to court to stop East Bay Mud from expanding Pardee Reservoir. And I'm going to tell you, it wasn't easy, it wasn't without stress, and it wasn't cheap. And Amador County did not go to bat for the river. We did, and we won. And we heard strong support at that time, and we've had it ever since, for keeping these miles of river open. In terms of why we make it a wild and scenic river and not just have a dam prohibition, I think I sent you guys an email from Lisa Bolton, who runs the Calaveras Visitors Bureau. And one of the things she points out, and I'll just quote from this, says, in the highly competitive destination marketing environment, we make sure to use our official environmental designations like the Wild and Scenic designation wherever possible. For instance, the Ebbets Pass National Scenic Byway is a significant asset for Calaveras tourism. We make sure to promote it as such rather than the Highway 4 corridor. So if you look at some of the places who use their Wild and Scenic designations, they use it to attract tourists, and I know that the study thought the economic benefit would be negligible. We actually disagree with that based on other studies that have been done. We think having a wild and scenic river label is like having a national park or state park or our national byway label. It attracts people to a place. Lisa went on in her letter that I provided to you to show how many people are posting on Instagram using the tag Wild and Scenic. It actually has meaning to people. They know it means it's a special place. And I don't think a tourism bureau is going to be able to advertise the McCullough Dam prohibited river and actually have the same effect based on what I know about marketing, which is a few things. As far as the special provisions that the Resources Agency proposed, as I said, they're similar to those in existing law. They mainly looked at the provisions on the Yuba River and Cache Creek and one other river. As far as the definition of free flowing, it's actually defined in the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act. Because the Resources Agency knows that the lack of definition makes people uncomfortable, they tried to define what a significant impact would be, and that's in the special provisions. And I think in terms of, the language in the study being rather general, Supervisor Forster, as you know, I spent 15 years working for the government, and generally is the great hedge word of government writing. And so when you're writing summary language and not a statute, you have to use words like that because it's summary language. But the devil is really in the details, and ultimately the devil is in the statutory language. And heaven is in the details, they say too. So the special provision language that could form the basis for a future law is important. It's important that everybody understand it the same way and interpret it the same way. And, we are willing to work with the agencies to make sure that we have a river and water in our future too. We invested significant time and effort in the MOQWISE program to try to define projects that the water agencies could pursue that would be acceptable to river advocates and acceptable to the residents of the counties. And, we've continued to go along that path. So I'm about to lose my voice, but that's about all I have to say. I may add this in terms of having a short term, let's take a look at this in 20 years. I've been working on this river for nearly 29 years, and everything takes a really long time. The relicensing of the McCullummy River project took more than 20 years. The building of the Big Bar River access point took more than 20 years. The lease on that land is a 70-year lease. Water plans take decades to develop. 20 years is a blink of an eye in river time. And basically, if you try to put something in place that only puts a temporary protection on the river, it's not going to fly in the legislature because the Sierra Club and Friends of the River will never go for it, and I have much less influence than they do. And B, it just tells East Bay Mud or Metropolitan Water District or one of the groups that really does have money for big dams, that they just have to wait a while before they come back. So, anything else? Questions for you?
You call that a temporary protection, though?
No, I was saying...
All it is a sunset clause for review after the end
that's
of
temporary. That's temporary protection.
30 years is a long time, and really, I wouldn't expect much to change in 30 years. So to me, I don't see why that's such a big problem.
Well, the purpose of the Wild and Scenic Rivers Act is to protect rivers in perpetuity, just like the purpose of national parks is to protect national parks in perpetuity and state parks in perpetuity. The whole notion is that there's some things that ought not to change in this world, and we should have some guarantee for future generations that we will have special natural places for their future. That's the purpose of the law, and so it is a big deal. And I'm personally very grateful to people who have set aside state parks, have set aside wild and scenic rivers. I've rafted on quite a few of them, have set aside national parks for having the wisdom not to look out 20 years and 30 years, but to look out for generations. And you've got a water agency before you saying that if they get the provisions they need, they can provide for future water and we can have a river. To me, that sounds like the best of all possible worlds.
Other comments?
I have a question for Catherine.
Catherine?
Please.
We're going to make your voice go completely out.
That's all right. I've lost it twice lately.
If you want to, basically what you're saying is you don't want to see a dam on that river?
Yeah.
So then would you be favor or would it be acceptable to you to have maybe have a study designation like was done on like Deer Creek or Mill Creek?
No, because right now you can see people are already trying to raise Shasta, which is going to flood the McLeod River. So there's a big difference between having a river designated wild and scenic. And I've mentioned before there's great tourism value to it. I've also mentioned in previous meetings that I have seen many a grant program that grants money for wild and scenic rivers for fuel reduction, for youth recreation, for things like that, that wouldn't just do it if you're just like plunked in an obscure section of the Wild and Scenic River statute. So no.
I had another question before you leave, if you don't mind. Please. You did say special provisions in the study are very important because they may go into statute down
Yes.
down the road. So is that correct?
Well, I think that's the assumption that everybody has. I can't speak for Gene, but I think that's why they're paying so much attention to the language, is that everybody assumes there'll be a bill in the future.
Probably true. So with that being said, would you have any heartburn having a special provision for a couple landowners who've requested not be included?
Yeah, because there's, I don't have an issue with having a special provision for Roaring Camp. I think they have a particular situation. But, the California Wild and Scenic Rivers Act has no impact on local landowners. And so I think it is not going to be acceptable to people who are writing statutes to write in exemptions for people who aren't going to be affected by a bill. I mean, that's just not done. So.
This is a landowner that has a river on his property.
Well, I know, but there are other landowners along the river who have river on their property too, and the California Wild and Scenic Rivers Act has no authority over how that landowner uses his land unless he wants to build a dam, and then it would keep him from doing that. There's no regulatory trigger, Brian.
If there's not, I mean, then what's the problem putting it in there and they'd say, hey, we don't care, doesn't matter, doesn't affect us?
It sets a bad precedent in law. Thank you.
But you're, oh, okay.
Morning, supervisors and staff.
Morning. Good morning.
I'm Judy Najarian from Pioneer. As a taxpayer and stakeholder, I just wanted to let you know that I do oppose the wild and scenic designation, and I wanted to explain my concerns. I'm concerned about the long-term ramifications of this, including these sections of the river into this plan. I think about Mother Nature, whether it's HARP, the antenna array that can adjust our jet stream, or whether we've had a magnetic pole shift. Our global weather is changing, and it is unpredictable. It's been 112 years since snow has fallen on the Great Pyramid and the Sphinx in Egypt. It just did. So we cannot predict our future drought here on the West Coast, nor can we predict the real effect of an 11-year cyclic solar impact on our weather. My concern is the word inventory that Ms. Yvette spoke about in the last supervisors meeting. The word inventory to me implies a long-range state control of our water and possible theft of our voice in how our water is used when we need it. Our voice must be about serving our priorities. And those are water management and water storage, and it's critical for all of us, and not just for special interests. So I just wanted to voice my concerns. I am concerned about the shifting conditions that we cannot predict, and I just want you to take that into consideration. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.
Anybody else? And I should make clear, which I didn't do clearly enough, I think, at the beginning of the meeting, that people are going to be limited to 3 minutes.
Sherry Curtis. This was almost a 400-page report, and it's hard to give you our concerns in 3 minutes. We've had other people up here for a long period of time, and I would request that the concerns on the draft letter and the study report be allowed.
Okay, well, let me just say before you start, though, that the best thing to do with those concerns is to write them and send them to the Resources
I will
Agency.
intend to do that, but I want it in the record. The letter constructed by you, Lynn, is nothing but a political propaganda piece, which is allowing the designation and promoting the designation for wild and scenic for the Mokelumne River. Some members of the board at their last meeting suggested that they might need to make changes to it, but so far they haven't made enough changes. There are some changes to support special provisions which would be included in the designation of wild and scenic for the river. But I believe that the water agencies have been deceived, as the language written for their protection is lacking in legally spelling out that water shall be made available not just for their water rights use, but how the water is to be used. And it should be for agriculture. This should be written in to be clear. It should be allowed for agricultural, commercial, institutional, and industrial uses, not just for domestic use, as the Wild and Scenic Law only states that water shall be made available for domestic uses. The letter fails to state that the wild and scenic designation, if done, would put the river and lands abutting it under the power of one man's opinion. The Director of Natural Resources and the ERAC Committee discussed in the settlement agreement for PG&E's Energy FERC License 137. The committee is made up of environmental organizations and public agencies, and it works by anything that may need to change in the agreement, or anyone else to join that committee would only be allowed if there is unanimous consent by all the members. Now, there really is no public members representing the public taxpayers or the county of Amador or its water agencies. So much for transparency.
Excuse me just a moment. So that committee you're talking about is in the Wild and Scenic Statute?
It's in the settlement agreement with PG&E, which under the study would be included in the new designation to be protected. The settlement agreement, I believe really to see what is being proposed to the designation of this wild and scenic for the McCollum River, one must read the settlement agreement before your letter is sent. The time was extended so you would have time to do that. Catherine Evett of the Foothill Conservancy, one of the groups in that settlement agreement, or Joel Wall, should be able to send it electronically to you. And going down to another point, there are no opposition documents to wild and scenic listed in the report from the Calaveras County Board of Supervisors or the Amador County Board of Supervisors. A pretty biased study, to say the least. The study should list the cost of the study and who helped pay for it. That has not been done, nor any answers to that question as yet. There has been some misrepresentation presented in the study that all the river has been environmentally studied, which is not accurate. They referred heavily on the U.S. Forest Service study in 1990, an old study. That study was never finished and would need a record of decision from the U.S. Forest Service to prove it was finished. Number 6 in my concerns. There has been some represented an AB 975 bill that should have been mentioned in the study because it clearly shows where the intentions of the wild and scenic designations are headed. A wider scope of land abutting the river was requested to comply with the federal designation. Thank goodness the bill failed that time. Number 7, under the scenic values section in the study and other sections, it states that the study consultants met with unnamed individuals knowledgeable about eligibility for state and wild scenic rivers. Who were these individuals? What were their qualifications? The study should include these names. The study did not even attempt to map the scenic resources or identify the described area qualitatively of relative importance of viewing locations. The designations were based on general assumptions that nearly all areas of the river corridors could be visible
to people traveling across country or by trails, roads, or by kayak in or as people traveling on slopes above the river corridors. This means that anything wanting to be built on private or public lands must not obstruct the scenic view shed. More erosion of local control and regulation of private property. There are 550 miles of the total McCollum watershed study area, and this comment was based on the study language. The B segment classified as wild above the Tiger Creek segment should be restudied. I don't believe that it should not be designated as wild, as there is a road and trail that goes along the river corridor, and people can readily access the river.
Sherry, I'm going to have to ask you to wrap it up.
I will. I'm almost done. Thank you. There was no cultural study done between Tiger Creek Afterbay and the main stem of Highway 49. This should have been done. The study did not state that the high pulse flows required in the settlement agreement listed in the FERC license hurts the fish and fishing along the corridors used for kayaking. So it appears that these environmental groups are pitting kayaking above the fishing industry and that they really don't care about the fish. The fishermen pay a state license fee to fish, but the kayakers do not pay the state or PG&E anything to kayak, which would help pay for the maintenance of the facilities required and used by them. Meanwhile, AWA Water and other water agency users must pay for every drop of water they use and are affected by the state conservation rules, but the pulse flows for kayaking must be provided regardless of droughts or other restrictions or rules placed by the State Water Control Board, and somehow that should be changed. The segments of B and E have not been inventoried. Under the BLM 2008 study, it was only done on 20.2 miles, which were declared eligible for wild and scenic. The study gives the impression that all the 37 or 40 miles along the river have been thoroughly studied, and this should be corrected. Since all the 37 to 40 miles along the McCollum River are now protected by the Environmental Quality Act, the Endangered Species Act, the Clean Water Act, the Air Quality Act, the state, federal fish and wildlife agencies, our U.S. Forest Service, and the Bureau of Land Management, do we really need another agency to manage the river? The study does state that the McCollum River is really not wild and free-flowing, but it still could qualify under the section of the Wild and Scenic Act. This is pure legal double talk.
Sherry,
How
I'm going to
can
have
it
to cut
be
you off.
legally both ways? It is very conflicting and confusing. How are we to know what the state would be considering in the future for the term free-flowing and unencumbered if the state administrations
I'm
changed?
going to have to cut you off.
Well,
You've had much more time than any other speaker, including Gene Mancebo. You don't need to keep going. Enter your letter into the record.
I will do so.
Thank you.
Thank you for your consideration.
Yes.
Lois McDonald, Jackson resident. I'm here to plead for the future needs of our people. The natural resources on this planet are for the use of man. We are to use wisdom in controlling them. We have environmental protection laws. We have many, many laws that do control this. But to put in, the more that I read about wild and scenic, all it should say is no dam. That's all what it's about. No dam. Okay. The previous speaker talked about the change in our climate changes, the things that are happening, that we are told that we are to consider drought as a normalcy in the state of California. How do you provide for people when there's drought? DAM. We need to store water. When the water is not stored, it goes out to the ocean and is wasted. We need the ability, if in the future, if we need to have more water, we need to have this ability. Now dams, that's like it's a horrible word to environmentalists. Dams make beautiful lakes. I spent many hours on the lakes created by dams, and they're wonderful for swimming, fishing, boating. There's a lot of wonderful uses for dams. It is not like there's a horrible, horrible thing there. If we need the water, we ought to be able to have the ability, if we need it, to be able to do it in the future. And this would just cut this off, say absolutely not. And so I think that since the Board of Supervisors has voted in the past to be opposed to wild and scenic, that should be spelled out in the letter, that when we respond to this, to the board for what we're doing here with this letter, we should state that we have real concerns that if we put this absolute stopping on future use, that there is no way. It says in here that it will have special provisions for assurances regarding future local water use. What are those assurances? How can you make assurances if you can never provide for more water to be stored for us? What are these assurances? This doesn't make sense to me. I would really plead that the board reiterate that we have voted against wild and scenic. All the literature seems to say, well, it isn't going to hurt this, and it isn't going to hurt that, and it isn't going to hurt this, and it isn't going to hurt that. All these things to assure us that it's very unimportant. It's not intrusive. It's not going to disturb anything. Just go ahead and do it. But the thing it will do is no dam ever, and that's what it's all about. That's what should be the capital title on the whole thing. That's what it's about. And I think that is a very bad mistake that we would put that into concrete, that can never, ever happen. We don't know the future.
Okay, let me please just remind you that if you're not soon finished, I'm going to have to cut you off. But also, what we're considering today is comments about the report, not whether we like wild or scenic. It's about the report.
I understand
that the Resources Agency
I
did.
understand that.
Okay, go ahead.
The report is glowing all these glowing things about how wonderful this is. And it is not. It is not stating our concerns. It is not stating our concerns, which has been voted on by our board, and that should be in there as part of the letter.
Okay, then what I suggest you do, as I did with Ms. Curtis, is put all that in a letter and send it to the Resources Agency, who are the ones that researched over an entire year and came up with this report.
I understand that, but you are sending a letter to them, and the letter should...
That's not entirely clear right now.
The letter should reiterate our concerns about it instead of just going on and on about how this is wonderful, that's wonderful. It should reiterate our concerns, which has been voted on by the board, who are representatives of the people of Amador County.
We have mentioned that the board voted against it, but again, our assignment is to write a letter from this board, if we can get agreement on it, that comments on the report from the Resources Agency, period. Not whether we love wild and scenic. In fact, we put that in there, that we voted against it. So it's about the report.
2 little words at the 4-page letter. Let's be fair.
Thank you. Anyone else?
Morning, Board. I'll be brief.
John.
Morning, John.
John Hasenbuttle, Cal-Am Forestry Team. Notwithstanding all the comments you've heard and the very good discussion you folks had, the letter that was in this packet is a significant improvement over the one you reviewed last time. The worst thing that can happen is the board not send in a letter. We have all the confidence in the world that Lynn and Brian can sit down and work it out. That's what we suggest. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any other comments? Mr. Rodman.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'll be very brief. There's only a couple of issues here that I have with the study. And the one of them that I know that was, in the study recommendations, number 4, has to do with prohibiting the governor from recommending this, because that's a very easy process. Once it becomes a state
Mr. Rodman,
scenic and wild river.
that was not in the study. That was a recommendation from Water Agency. It's special provision number 4, but it's not in the study.
Well, it's in the one that we just got from the meeting I went to on Friday.
It's a recommendation.
Yeah, it's a recommendation, from the study group.
Okay.
What concerns me about that is that, we can live with the state wild and scenic river at Roaring Camp, because it only has to do with the riparian vegetation. It's only the body of the river. It doesn't affect our private land that borders the river. So, but what happens is if this is adopted by the state without this provision that the governor can recommend it, then it goes right to the Department of Interior, and without any public hearings, without any congressional input, it can be accepted into the federal wild and scenic classification. If that were to happen, that talks about a quarter of a mile on either side of the river they have control over. And when you're standing down at Roaring Camp, anybody that knows when you survey something, the quarter of a mile goes flat. It doesn't go up the side of the hill. And so, Roaring Camp would be totally encumbered by that quarter of a mile, along with all of its mining claims, which would essentially put us out of business. So, that not only should that provision be in there to prohibit the governor, it ought to be in capital letters so that everybody can see it and don't miss it, And basically, that's all that concerns me. We're not happy with the designation. I don't think it'll help us any, but it won't hurt us any either. I don't feel either. So, thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, back to the board. What are your wishes?
Well, I think we can come up with a letter that responds to this report. I think one particular, just to add on to what Supervisor Anetto was referring to, or follow up on that, about AWA's comments, maybe we should just put a sentence in there saying that we look forward to the Natural Resources Agency's response to AWA's comments or special provisions. So we don't need to list all of those in our letter.
I'm okay with that. How about the rest of the board?
I'm not.
It needs to reference
They need to list them.
the water agency and the special provisions.
And I'm okay with
It's not just the water agency, it's from all the
agencies.
all the agencies.
Well, yeah.
And I'm okay with mentioning that as a sentence referring to the AWA special provisions, because both Mr. Mancino and Catherine Evett said they're still working on them. So I think it would be foolish of us to actually try to list them because they're not final.
You said a sentence. I think it's important. We very much stress that as something that this board wants to see happen.
Okay.
Yeah, if it's foolish, then I guess I'd be foolish, because I think we need to lay out and take a position supporting the positions AWA has taken in those special provisions.
But we don't know what those are yet, Brian.
I think we do. Maybe Mr. Mancebo could answer that question. I mean, I received, and there probably is still some negotiating going on between
General
parties,
idea.
but
It wasn't just the water agency, it was, the county was involved in those negotiations too, trying to come up with some language and never.
Jean, do you want to? I thought I had heard you say in your previous testimony
And
that you're still working on it.
Just as a point, I never received any of these. I'm aware of, so. Like other members of the board have that information, I never received it, so something that should go to all board members.
I think that you're probably right. I wish the chairperson and I had done that. It's probably an oversight on our part.
Okay.
My apologies.
Gene Mancebo, so the water agencies, local agencies, had developed the special provisions. We're good with those provisions, but other stakeholders are not. And so we're committed to continue to work on that language to try to adjust those. That might change what we have if we come to concurrence on those.
Gene, but at this time, that's your position.
Right. That's our board's position.
Board, I meant,
And-
and I was speaking inclusively.
Right. And as I said earlier, we're committed to try to work through the language, to change those, to get, find common ground. So they may not be our final requested provisions. And in fact, we may sit down even with the Natural Resource Agency and with Foothill Conservancy and maybe Friends of the River all together and try to hammer the language out. So that could happen. But today, this is what we have, this is what our board is okay with, but we are committed to continue to work on that.
I think that's all you have to say, that the Amador County Board of Supervisors encourages ongoing negotiations
Yes.
between the parties to develop recognition of the special provisions that have been proposed by the local water agencies, something to that effect.
Yes. You have something,
Got
Brian?
to make it very clear that this board supports those provisions and working in the direction of of encouraging ongoing communications between the parties.
Yes, I would agree, and maybe it could be something about we support the provisions as written, and we are amenable to looking at and looking at any future amendments. But I think our support of those provisions needs to be out there, and we can encourage the parties to work together, and they come up with some revisions. We're acceptable. We're amenable to looking at them and possibly working something out there. I do have a question for Greg. As far as this, there's an ongoing discussion among the water agency, probably some members of the board, and other stakeholders and affected groups. And it seems like the point person's kind of been AWA as far as some of these special provisions and the changes. Would it be okay if Gene Mancebo or AWA included the board, sent those to the board? Because Lynn and I were in the committee there, we had direction to work on that letter, and so we received them from Gene, but like Supervisor Axe brought up, he hasn't had an opportunity to look at those. Could they send them direct to the board, or should it go to their clerk of the board and she'll put them in her packets? How should that work as far as getting the special provisions and any revisions?
The ones that AWA has developed?
Yes.
That's a public record. They can send that directly to any and all of the board members.
I'd like to see that done in the future, so they're in the loop.
And I think we might even want to go a step further is to actually cite the special provisions in the letter rather than be nonspecific. Say the board supervisors is supportive of the following special provisions.
Well, then I need to.
Well, let me finish.
Go ahead.
Special provisions being included in any designation, but then have a proviso after that, the board also understands that something to this effect, that both parties, both sides of the equation we'll sit down at the table and finalize language in negotiations.
So again, you're suggesting that we put AWA's current version of the special provisions in our letter.
But I want to make it loose enough where you make it clear that we expect ongoing negotiations to come up with a final version of special provisions.
Well, I have a problem
why
with that.
wouldn't
If you need a motion to do that, then I'm just going to have to vote no, because I don't agree with the current special provisions that the water agencies have provided.
Maybe, what's the issue that you have a problem with?
Well,
maybe?
I don't have them right in front of me right now, especially, unfortunately, but it was, as I recall, it was provision number 6, which basically says, to the extent that these special conditions conflict with other provisions of this chapter, this subdivision shall control. What that says to me is the special provisions control everything. And they don't, and the, the other issues that the report stated, no significant impact by Wild and Scenic on all these uses, are just pushed aside. So I'm not for that. You can disagree with me
why not
if
make
you
it so you don't have to be fully supportive of them all, but what you can say is the following special provisions have been proposed, state what they are, and say, while the Board of Supervisors generally accepts sentiment or whatever in these special provisions, we realize that ongoing negotiations between both sides need to take place and we encourage a positive outcome. And I'm just
for all stakeholders
coming up with some kind of
Yeah.
language. So,
Madam Chairman, I'm sorry, Richard. And I would like to add one, that the Board of Supervisors are concerned that a 20 to 30-year sunset clause was not discussed and should have been addressed. General comment.
Okay. Well,
it's not accusing anybody of anything. It's just
Maybe what you could do is we'd like that possibly as a consideration in the report, that this may be an option.
okay, as far as I can see, we have a lot of further editing to do.
Yes, and I would agree with you, Madam Chairman, or Chairperson. I would like to have some fairly concrete direction, so when we sit down and talk, that we understand what our direction has been from the board.
Right.
So I think we'll probably have to maybe at some point lay some of these things out, and if we have to have a vote on them, or
well, here's my problem. We were going to say we support the special provisions and leave it at that. We're probably okay with that, but once we put the special provisions in there, you're not okay with that.
Right,
So
that's
we
true.
don't have to say
That's
we're
true.
supportive of the special provisions. We say we understand there are special provisions that have been put forth by the water agencies, plural.
That are being
And we
considered.
encourage all parties to sit down and negotiate a final language that is acceptable towards, along with the wild and scenic designation, if you want to say that way. But
Yeah, we can say something to the effect that we're very interested in, what the comments, what the response is to those special provisions by the Natural Resources Agency, because ultimately that might determine whether we support or not, whether certain members of the board will support.
I think it needs to be made clear, though, that this board finds many of those special provisions. Most members of this board find many of those special provisions very important. I'm not sure if all of them are a necessity for me.
Yeah, I understand that, but I think at this point we're trying to get some response from them, what they're willing to do, and that it's being worked out between the various stakeholders. I think that's probably one of the most significant changes that could be added to the letter. The other thing might be the prohibiting the federal designation, which I think was part of AWA's proposal, but reference that also back to Roaring Camp and their concerns as well.
Well, I think one thing is, I understand what you're saying, what they're willing to do, but I think we also must do our job and state where we are.
as clearly as we can.
Yes. And otherwise, we're going to write this fuzzy, nebulous letter, kind of, you know,
Right.
well, there's these provisions and blah, blah, blah. I would like to state where we're at. We support these provisions. And if the board votes yes, the board votes yes. The board votes no, the board votes no. And also, in addition, I'd like to see a provision number 7 for Roaring Camp. And some language, basically, you know, them exempt from this or not to be affected.
Well, that was the last paragraph on page 1. That was the attempt of protecting Roaring Camp, and Mr. Rodman was in agreement to that.
I guess he specifically asked for no federal.
Yes, and
With that exclusion from the
right,
water.
and that's fine.
I think that's reasonable. Ask and see what they say.
So are you in favor of having a special provision for Roaring Camp, or just? I think language is very important, and you know, a special provision is that's saying who we want to set aside. Otherwise, we're saying who we recognize Roaring Camp. It's there, and
Well, we could do both. We can put that in our response and ask and see what the response is, because they are a unique business on the river. I think because AWA is asking for there not to be any federal designation, and Mr. Rodman has indicated that probably satisfy most of his concerns, that should be added in too, but maybe we can also reference it back to not only what the water agencies want, but also ask for as well.
yeah, that's kind of giving him. It's recognizing what their operation is, and that it's important. I would agree.
Yeah, you know, we can mention that their operation, you know, try to exempt their operation, see what that.
So
what that
Supervisor
brings.
Axe, I'm not sure what you're saying about the language. The designation of the identified segments of the Macaulay River Interstate and Wild Scenic System shall not prejudice, alter, affect in any way, or interfere with the maintenance, repair, or recreational values or operations of Roaring Camp Mining Company and
That's
its
fine.
associated structures
Can
and
we just
facilities.
also add in the prohibiting the federal designation? And you can go on to add, which is also a concern of the local or wish of the local water agencies.
And based on what Mr. Rodman said, I think that language should suffice, along with the advocation for no designation or no request by the governor for federal designation. But I think that the two members of the committee can come up with language of the special provisions in being included to say that the board would like to sees these special provisions as important, but realizes that negotiations between the sides need to take place and encourages that.
Sounds good. Well, we need to get, I don't know that I have the most current version of the water agency's special provisions. And I'm okay with, if Supervisor Oneto and I can agree on certain of those special provisions, including no attempt to designate, you know, National Wild and Scenic. I'm fine with that.
Well, I think, Mr. Mancebo, your email of February 20th, 2018, is that the latest version? Like, 'cause I think Lynn and I both received that. This one here?
I believe it is, and I also provided a copy to the clerk.
Okay, that's fine.
Okay.
Thank you.
And also, so are we going to, so then we're going to have special provisions, pardon me, 1 through 6, as far as the AWA's proposal, that's acceptable?
No, because 6 is not acceptable to me.
Well, I think we're
Then
asking
they're
for.
meaningless.
I think we're asking for this, all special provisions to be included, but that this board would expect negotiations to take place between the parties to come up with a reasonable language.
But I think I could probably support that. You're saying we're supporting 1 through 6, but we also understand there's going to be some negotiations going on, and at some point we may have a updated version that we could possibly support or get behind?
Let me play devil here, as I've done with Gene and you guys to some extent. Why are we are the Amador County Board of Supervisors. Why do we feel so strongly we need to have recommendations from our water agencies within our response?
Well, one, not just the water agency, it's all the water purveyors, but that's the whole point. They are the purveyors of the water in the county, and their job is to provide water into the future, not just for this generation, but 3 generations down the road. But two, I think it's that same language that the representatives from this board sat on the committee with the water agency advocating for some of those same principles. Now, do we expect them to turn out that way in the end? Maybe they're not going to. So I think you have to make it general enough to say that here are the provisions that want to say we're supportive of or that we know are being promoted.
I would rather say
and
that.
We're hopeful that the stakeholders or the representatives of both sides, including this board, can sit at the table and hammer out an agreement in the end.
That's
and
fine with me.
Put that on paper.
That's fine with me.
Part is deep in thought reading here. I missed the first little part. I was deep in thought reading.
I think you want to indicate that here are the provisions that this board feels may be important to a final language, but we recognize that stakeholders will have to sit at the table, including this board, and come up with that final language, and it may not include all facets of what's being requested. I mean, that's what I said earlier about give and take.
Yeah.
I think if that's the only way that this is going to work, if Food Oil Conservancy, Friends of the River, and anybody else on the other side sits down with the Water Agency, Board of Supervisors, and come up with language that's acceptable, and as it was said, we were very close before.
I could agree with that. I don't know if I'd go with the feels maybe, something about that we believe is important. Yeah, I could probably live with that. Because that's my thought. I think what we have here is important. I think provision number 6 is probably maybe the most important, because what we're trying to do is state that those provisions, which we think are very critical, if it comes down to who wins, the outside forces or Amador County, to me it means we win, and that's why I like that special provision. Also, I do want to bring up, I brought it before, I just want to bring it up again before I forget. There is a property owners contacting me, and whatever, I want to put it before the board. If it's something we can ask to have a special provision for them, I'd like to. If the board doesn't want to, so be it.
I'll go ahead.
Maybe what we do right now is have a vote on that, and the board says yes, we can put it in. If the board says no, I won't worry about it. I'll just, that's it.
Why do you need a special provision? Why can't you just put one simple line or a couple lines in the letter saying that the board has been contacted by individuals that wish their property not to be included in any wild and scenic designation made in the future? And let them respond to that, whether that's something that is even doable.
Let them send their own letters to the agency.
I guess that would work, as long as we put a line in our letter, something along that line.
I'm okay with that because I have very strong feelings, and I've heard from all of you guys about our appreciation of the recreational value that Roaring Camp provides to this county. And, I believe it probably does draw tourists, but, I can't prove that at this moment. But I feel very strongly about having Roaring Camp mentioned in there. And if we want a more generic sentence saying there are other property owners who have contacted us, that's okay with me.
About our sunset clause.
I think it can be mentioned the same thing as the property owners that don't want their land included. Is some board members have indicated their wish that a sunset clause of 20 to 30 years and review be included in any designation, and then ask let the state give their opinion on that?
I don't agree with that, Richard. I think the board should take, if we're going to take, we should take a position saying this is something that the board would like considered. So this board is taking a position. In other words, just kind of saying, there's kind of something out there you might want to look at.
But you're asking on the study, you're not asking
Right.
on
Right.
designation. This is for the study. Maybe what you're asking for is a position in the future on if wild and scenic appears to be a reality, then we ask for a sunset
Sunset
clause
clause.
to be included.
Okay, so you're saying this should be included as something to be looked at and a possible option.
Well, that's why I just had a general in the comments. We're concerned that a 20 to 30-year sunset clause was not discussed and should have been, needs to be addressed.
That probably work. Yeah.
No,
Be looked at.
Only thing else is I'd like comment I made earlier about the last line, this important study being changed to legislatively authorized.
Yes, I've
study.
already changed that.
Got that
yeah.
one, okay?
I don't think the motion by UMRA, after what, 6 or 7, 8 tries, motion is good enough on the special provisions for them. To me, I think we want to be specific and let the agency comment on our request that those special provisions, different parties sit down at the table and work those out. To me, it needs to be more specific than the UMRA motion.
Also, I think I believe there's 3 original special provisions in the study. He's looking at IC3. Our letter calls out 4, so I think we should make it 3, which it is.
Well, actually, Jennifer and I found the 4. I don't have them in front of me.
Really?
Yep. What's that? We were looking in the actual report. I can show you where it is, actually.
It's on page 7-3.
Alternatives and recommendations.
I have them here in 7-3, page 7-3. So, but there's only 3 of them there.
Where did we see that, Jennifer? 'Cause there was another one. I wonder if it was
Oh,
in-
maybe. Gene's got his hand up there.
Yes.
Might be able to shed a little bit of light on that.
Okay, thank you.
The study itself has only 3 special provisions in it.
Okay.
And those are basically protect existing water rights, future
Right.
water rights, and then PG&E's operations.
Right.
In a presentation that the Natural Resource Agency
That
made
was it.
on Friday, they identified 4, and the additional one was the prohibition, they're prohibiting the governor or the state from seeking the federal jurisdiction.
Correct, thank you. See, I'm not going totally
Okay.
crazy.
So that was in like
Just a
a
little bit.
PowerPoint presentation?
It was, yes,
This was at camera or something?
well, it was also at the public hearing that was held in Moke Hill on the 15th.
So I guess, is that in the study then, or if her reference is study, it's probably not in the study.
It is not in the study. The PowerPoint presentation just indicated that was kind of the points. They're general. They indicated that they were still taking comments.
Right.
I think they also made it pretty clear that those aren't final.
All right, so 3 is fine. That's fine. Mr. Rodman, did you? Please come up.
And this is the PowerPoint presentation that they gave.
Yes.
And they indicated that number 4, which is the prohibits the governor one,
Right,
is what they intend for their new report
Right.
to include.
right.
Okay, it's not there yet.
Because it is a draft
Because
report.
it is it's a fluid study yet. So.
Yes. Thank you.
Well, we'll work it out, 3 or 4, whatever it may be. How about that?
Okay. That's fine. Okay, are we,
What was they extended an additional 10 days, is that correct?
yes, they did. The
Which puts
deadline
us
is
to what day then?
March 8th is the deadline. So, would you guys like me to call a special meeting? What do I need, 3 days' notice for that? 1 day notice, okay.
You know, there's something else I'd like clarification.
First, I'd like to know if, after a redraft, you guys would like a special meeting
Yeah. I think
before March 8th.
I think so.
Okay.
March 6th would probably be a good aim for, but I think Supervisor Forster's out of the.
You'll be doing that without me. I'll be at
I won't be here March 6th.
I'll be at National Association of Counties Legislative Conference.
When will you guys be here? The 5th?
At the 7th?
No.
7th?
It would have to occur by the 2nd.
Which is,
I mean, yeah.
which is this Friday.
Yep. 'Cause, I'm going to be gone that whole week.
Oh.
You know, could we set the meeting later? I'm at the run up and get my little calendar. I thought I had it. I don't have it, so.
Okay, we'll talk about it and set it later, and then it'll be announced. It's 1 day.
Oh, okay.
That's okay. Sometime Friday except midday is okay with me.
Yeah,
Okay with you, Frank?
I'm pretty much wide open on Friday.
The only
so-
question is going to be between now. Well, we're just going to have to find time to make it happen, that's all.
I think so. You're right.
Okay, so is everybody in agreement? Special meeting on Friday,
I'll have to
March 2nd. You won't be here?
You guys can handle it.
set one up, just make sure we get a date that works.
Yeah, and what time are you guys talking about? Again, for me, it has to be either in the morning or the afternoon, not between 11 and 12:30.
9 or 10?
Sure. Let,
Well, I said I don't have my calendar, so I mean,
right.
We are supposed to be getting a pretty good storm in Thursday night, so.
Oh, that's right.
I don't know if that would impact.
I'll tell you what,
So maybe the
I would like,
afternoon.
what I would like to do, if the board is in agreement, let me take my notes here, redraft, third time draft, and I'm assuming it's okay to email it out to the board members? Or is that violation of the Brown Act? And I thought so.
I think you and Supervisor Onetto will need to work on it.
Just the two of you.
Okay.
When you have a draft for the meeting, it can go
Yeah.
through
All
the
right,
board
it
members
looks like
through
you
the
and me,
clerk.
Brian.
But
yeah, and I think
can-
what we probably ought to do is maybe towards the end this meeting, we should probably talk about our direction somewhat specific, so we can maybe listen to that. If we need to, we can listen to tape, and we'll have it bang, bang, bang right there, so we can get it done.
Okay, and we'll determine the time on March 2nd after Supervisor Onetto looks at his calendar.
Thank you.
Anything else? Hey, I think we have to go back into closed session. Yes, we
No,
do.
you have minutes.
Oh, that's right. I'm sorry.
I still had, I didn't think, I had a couple, I think we're done yet, so,
Oh,
I wanted a little bit of a change. I like to just put our position where it is. The second paragraph, there seemed like there's some confusion about the dates, and I thought rather than chasing those dates around, I'd like to change it to where it says, as you know, Amador County Board has consistently opposed the McCalmy being designated a wild and scenic river.
Okay, you can say
Period.
in the past.
In the past, yeah, that's fine.
that's fine.
Do you think we need to lay out, or we have enough direction from the board?
I think,
I guess we go back and listen to minutes. Well, just maybe we'll address a few of the things. We're going to have items 1 through 6 will be put in the letter. Richard had some language there. Maybe he could send that language to us. And I think it was.
I'll work with the chair. It shouldn't be that hard to make it acceptable to everyone.
And also, a sunset clause will be addressed in there. That's something to be considered, basically, is how we'll put in the letter. We'd
Just
like
to
see
say,
it
like
considered.
one, a couple of supervisors have suggested a sunset clause.
I would say
I'd
maybe
like to see them address it.
the board. I think the board would like to see it, something just they should address, not saying it'll be done.
It's going to have to be some supervisors because I don't agree with the sunset clause.
I don't think it would ever make it in the legislation. I mean, it's just point doing the wild and scenic. Sorry, just. Pardon me? I understand. I just don't think that it would actually make it into any.
Well, Sacramento, you're very possibly right.
But there's nothing wrong with us putting in this letter
Absolutely.
that, yeah, it should be
Okay.
considered. Yeah. All right. Okay, anything else, Brian?
And I think we also talked about one alternative to consider is a Mill Creek and Deer Creek. That may be something to.
Well, we have that in there.
It's in there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'd like to see that change then, because what this is saying, in the event that the McClellan River is not accepted in the wild and scenic status system, I would like I'd like it to be considered as an alternative, just rather than putting it into the wild and scenic system. If they're looking at doing that, consider doing the Mill Creek or Deer Creek instead of a full-blown wild and scenic.
But I really feel the sentence says that in the event that the McCollum River is not accepted into the wild and scenic system, an alternative for consideration could be to apply the standards and use within Mill Creek and Deer Creek. It is our understanding that such provisions simply do not allow dams.
How about we are opposed?
That's very clear.
Yeah. How about we are opposed to the McClellan River?
No. Correct.
Where it says we're discussing wild and scenic, and the report says we should do it.
Okay, anything else?
I don't even know if I understood what I just said, but
What's that?
what I meant, Brian, was that if the
All right.
fallback would be the Mule Creek,
Well,
Mill Creek.
because that wasn't even in this report.
No, not the first draft.
I would say also though, if it's
Correct.
not, if the McClellan River is not accepting the wild and scenic status, hey, fine. Otherwise, it's saying, then why do we say we want to do the Mill Creek and Deer Creek?
I don't
We
think we're
crossed
there
that
yet.
bridge down the
That's
road.
right, exactly.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard.
Okay.
Okay? Ready?
Yep.
Okay, the regular board meeting is, oh, no, I'm sorry. I keep forgetting the minutes. We have minutes for February 13th Board of Supervisors meeting.
Page 4, I believe, under the Wild and Scenic draft report, I think the Thursday evening, it should be February 15th, I believe, and then
Yes, that's a good
on
point.
the bottom, she advised the deadline for comments is March 28th. What?
No, it wasn't. And actually, I think there
Like
was another
March 10th, wasn't it? or-
date issues.
So if you could get that date
Yeah,
revised
get
to what
those
it,
dates
what it was.
fixed up.
Yeah, I've got some changes too. I don't know, I was
Changes
thinking
or corrections?
probably both. One is the date's wrong. It has January, it should be February on page 5.
Right. That's a
Um,
correction.
I was busy scrambling looking for mine. They weren't where I thought they were. Also on page 9, very bottom paragraph, action number 2. It's here, it's carried, and unanimously carried, strike unanimously because I voted no. And then also on page 10, should be February 27th, not the 13th. Because our minutes are for the 13th, I think.
Right.
So should say 27th there.
Get those, Jennifer? Thank you.
You did vote no on it. It shows that.
It says unanimously carried.
On page 10, well, no, the unanimously carried to reconsider. Reconsider the previous motion.
No, but action number 2 is one I'm speaking of, and that was where I voted no.
Okay, well, it showed you as voting no, but it did say.
I think that should be struck. I thought there's one other change. Oh yeah, here's another one. Page 7. About the second or third paragraph down, depending on how you look at it. Motion is moved by Supervisor Forrester and seconded by Supervisor Axe, and unanimously carried to Forrester, seconded by Supervisor Axe, and unanimously carried to. So that should be struck. So after where it says unanimously carried, you should strike where it says to Forrester, seconded by Supervisor Axe, unanimously carried. It's got redundant language in there. There's a couple of typos. That's all I got.
Anything else? Do I have a motion to approve?
So moved. With changes.
Second.
Okay. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Meeting is sort of adjourned, except we're going into closed session. What?